please come to order. Those not having privileges of the floor will please vacate the chamber at this time. All members and guests in the galleries will please rise as we are led in prayer today by Braden Whitelatch and Alyssa Kalo. They are students at Our Lady of Peace in Wheeling and the guest of the lady from the 3rd Doggett Storage.
In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. God of power and might, wisdom and justice, through you authority is rightly administered, laws are enacted, and judgment is decreed. Assist with your spirit of counsel and fortitude our government leaders of these United States.
May they always seek the ways of righteousness, justice, and mercy. May they always do what is right for our people. Grant that they may be enabled by your powerful protection to lead our country with character, honesty, and integrity. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Members and guests will please remain standing as we are led in the Pledge of Allegiance today by the lady from the 3rd Doggett Storage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the guests in the gallery join with the members as we pledge allegiance to our flag? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Members and guests may be seated. Reading of the Journal.
Journal of the House of Delegates, Charleston, Wednesday, February 20th, 2019.
The gentleman, 51st, Doggett Williams.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of the Journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read.
Gentlemen, the 51st ask unanimous consent that further reading of the Journal be dispensed with and it be approved as having been read. Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. Introduction to guests. Lady from the 49th, Doggett Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. West Virginia history heroes are nominated by historical, genealogical, preservation, museum, patriotic, or like organizations from across the state. The purpose of this annual award is to give state-level recognition to individuals for dedicated service on behalf of an organization's programs or for a recent significant contribution to state and local history. This morning, 39 individuals were recognized as West Virginia History Heroes for 2019, and they are with us in the gallery this morning. If they could please stand and the House make them welcome.
The gentleman, the 25th, Doggett Painter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to welcome my history hero from Wyoming County, Mr. Ira Cook. I didn't get to see him at the event this morning. I missed him, but I just wanted to introduce him now, and I'll try to find him after the session, but let's just give them all a big house welcome.
The gentleman, the 10th, Doggett Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the past year, longtime teacher Phil Sturm has been organizing and documenting a vast amount of history from Wood County and working with the Wood County Bicentennial Commission and also with the West Virginia or Wood County Historical Society. Please welcome Phil Sturm.
The gentleman, the 21st, Doggett Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of myself and the other Concord University / Concord College alumni, we have with us here today the President, Dr. Kendra Bogus, and the COO and Vice President, Mr. Dan Fitzpatrick. If they would stand, and friends, please make them feel welcome.
The lady from the 3rd, Doggett Storch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Delegate Fluharty, Canestraro, Zukoff, and myself, I would like to welcome and introduce the 8th grade class of Our Lady of Peace. They are accompanied by their professor, one of their instructors, Renee Schneid, and their head of school, Miss Maureen Kerr, and Father Joseph Augustin, who is actually celebrating his birthday today. So I'd ask them all to stand in the house. Please make them welcome.
The gentleman, the 44th, Doggett Hannah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to take a second and welcome my history heroes from today. I think one had to leave, but we still have Julius Jones with us from Richwood. And If you guys have seen the picture of the Capitol in the West Rotunda, that was donated by Julius Jones, and that is the only picture, the only known photo of the first Capitol here in Charleston. So if he would please stand, and if the House would make him feel welcome.
The gentleman from the 11th, Doug Atkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to recognize Rome County Historical Vicki Baker. Would you please stand? Thank you. Would the House please make her welcome?
The lady from the 52nd, Doug Saipo.
Yes, I would like to introduce the history hero from Preston County, from Arthurdale, Jeannie Turnley. Would she stand, and we would give her a welcome.
The gentleman from the 17th, Doug Rohrbach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to recognize our history heroes here today from Cabell County. And if they could stand and be recognized as we call their names, Stacy Meadows, Gwen Blevins, Gaines Johnson, Sheridan Lane, and Roberta Cremines Casey. If they could stand, and the House give them a big welcome.
The gentleman from the 12th, Doug Westfall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We also have a history hero from Jackson County. Now, we're Mike McGrew. He's in the gallery behind us, him and his wife. Mike's a very good friend of mine and a fellow State Farm agent. So for all the House, please make him feel welcome.
Lady from the 51st, Doug Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of myself, the delegates from Monongalia and also Marion County, we have Monongalia Marion Health Science and Technology Academy, accompanied with Dr. Angie Turner. Can you please stand, Dr. Turner? Franklin Bush Jr., Taya Sullivan, Megan Scott, and Jordan Brown. Can you please give these young people a warm welcome?
The gentleman from the 19th, Dr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of myself and Delegate Hicks, we have a history hero in the West Gallery. If he would please stand up. His name is Stephen Cody Straley from Canova, and he is a volunteer for Heritage Farm in Huntington, which is actually in Wayne County, and he also helps volunteer at the Cerrito Museum. He's here with his parents, Carrie and Stephen Straley, so everybody please give him a round of applause.
The gentleman from the 26th, Doug Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have 2 pages today. They come to us from Southside K-8 School in War, West Virginia. War is the most southern city in the entire state of West Virginia, and they're very proud of that. Would the House please welcome Katie Mitchell, and her chaperone is Harold Mitchell. He's in the gallery behind me. And also Lillian Blankenship, and her sponsor and chaperone is Cindy Purdue. So from Southside K-8. Thank you, sir.
The lady from the 51st, Dr. Fleschauer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very excited today that one of the members of the senior class at Trinity High School has been designated an honorary Secretary of State because she helped register 100% of her high school senior class. So would the House please make Reagan Sharp welcome, and would she please stand?
The gentleman third, Dr. Fluharty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We had many winners, and on behalf of Delegate Storch and myself, we had many history heroes from the Northern Panhandle. The Northern Panhandle cleaned up this morning for history heroes. I was able to go to the presentation. I want to recognize them. There are many from Wheeling, Ohio County area. The representatives on behalf of Laura Carroll, when you hear your name, please stand. Alan Fitzpatrick, David Perry, Barbara Perala, Carla Tustin, John Smith, and I hope his son, a friend of mine, is here, Derek Smith, and a good friend of mine's father, Roger Micker. Would you please stand in the House, make them feel welcome? Thank you.
The gentleman of 17th, Delegate Lovejoy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have two groups I want to introduce today in the West Gallery. My friends Roger Casey and Karen Nance, if you could stand to be recognized. House, make them welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Also, Mr. Speaker, we have pages today from Huntington Middle School. So on behalf of the Cabell delegation, I want to welcome Caroline Kurtner, Riley Price, and Bella Nolan. If they would stand. They are accompanied by my good friend who's over in the South Gallery, Reeves Kurtner. Reeves, stand up. Make them feel welcome, please.
The lady from the 42nd, Delegate Lavender Bowe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of myself and Delegate Campbell, I'd like to recognize our history heroes, and if you'd please stand, Kathy Sawyer, Executive Director of the Greenbrier Valley Theater, and Max Gibson with the Greenbrier Historical Society. Please make them welcome.
The gentleman from the 30th, Delegate Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to introduce a hero as well, but a hero and a champion for working men and women, and that's a former member of this House, hiding away in the gallery there, Mr. Scott Brewer. So would Mr. Brewer stand, and would the House make him welcome?
The gentleman from the 42nd, Delegate Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Delegate Lavender Bowe and myself, we've got a page here today from Eastern Greenbrier Middle School, Bailey Honecker. She is chaperoned by her mother in the West Gallery, April Church. And I also have another introduction in our South Gallery representing AARP. He was assistant principal when I was a student at Greenbrier East High School. And I'm going to play a little role reversal here as I got a letter from his organization here a couple of weeks ago, and I think there's been a mistake. So, Danny Gray, if you would see me in my office after class. Will the House please make him welcome?
The gentleman from the 48th, Delegate Miley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the South Gallery, and on behalf of the Harrison County delegation, we have a couple of visitors down here lobbying for AARP. We have Mary Ann Ferris and Bob Orsburn. If they both would stand and allow the House to make you feel welcome.
The gentleman from the 5th, Delegate Pethel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In the South Gallery today, I have students here from 100 High School. As I call their name, I would ask if they would please stand. Victoria Hawkins, Rachel Hutton, Brandon Ryan, Jordan Davis, and Jocelyn Prado. And Jocelyn has been recognized as an honorary Secretary of State, and their teacher is with them today, Mrs. Hannah Evans. I would ask the House to give them a warm welcome. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 50th, Delegate Angelucci.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the South Gallery, we have Gary Wick representing the AARP from Marion County. I'd like to give him a warm welcome. And also we have students from East Fairmount High School, and they're accompanied by their instructors, Jamie Dean and Josh Dobbs. I'd like for them all to stand and be recognized.
The gentleman from the 43rd, Delegate Hartman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Delegate Thompson and me, in the West Gallery, we have some Randolph Countyans in the Capital for History today from the Appalachian Heritage Fortis area. If they would stand, the House make them welcome.
The gentleman from the 55th, Delegate Spinagle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to announce that we have two former members here in the House of Delegates with us, and if the House will please rise when I say their names, will the House make them welcome? We have former Delegate Dan Greer and former Delegate Steve Harrison. Will the House please rise and give them a warm welcome?
The gentleman from the 22nd, Delegate Jeffries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
In the North Gallery, I see some friends of mine from the West Virginia Citizens Defense League here to make sure that House Bill 2519, the Campus Self-Defense Act, stays its course. If they would rise and the House make them feel welcome.
Yes, sir.
The lady from the 32nd, Dr. Kessinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I noticed that in the center gallery, we are joined by a very active member of my community, my hometown of Mount Hope, West Virginia. So on behalf of the delegates from the 32nd District, if Jean Evansmore would stand and the House make her welcome.
The lady from the 38th, Dr. Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know if my history hero was able definitely to make it over, but just in case, if Anne Montague is here, I would like the House to make her welcome.
The gentleman 9th, Dr. Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, let's welcome Doctor of the Day from Beckley, West Virginia, Dr. Brian McCarley.
Are there further introductions? If not, the lady from the 49th for an update on the calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Moving from the House calendar to the special calendar is House Bill 2532, 2872, and 2452.
Reports of standing committees.
Originating in the Committee on Finance is House Bill 3136 relating to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. It's reported with recommendation that it do pass.
Report to be received.
Originating in the Committee on Finance is House Bill 3137 relating to the Personal Income Tax Fund. It's reported with recommendation that it do pass.
Report to be received.
Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 2441, removing certain requirements related to wages for construction of public improvements. Reports back committee substitute, therefore, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass.
Report to be received.
Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 2864, increasing salaries of magistrates, Supreme Court justices, circuit court judges, and family court judges. Reports the same back with amendment, with the recommendation that it do pass as amended, that it be referred to Committee on Finance.
Report to be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 2497 relating to the whistleblower law. Reported the same back with recommendation that it do pass.
Report to be received. Further reports of standing committees, reports of select committees, message from the executive, message from the Senate, resolutions, petitions, motions, bills introduced. Chair's Forum, we do have a motion.
Pursuant to the rules of the House, Rules 50, 51, and 53, Delegate Schott moves that House Bill 2519 be committed to the Committee on Finance.
The question before the House is a motion by the gentleman from the 27th. The gentleman from the 27th, Delegate Schott, to explain the motion. Ann.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think there was a good bit of confusion last night when we took up the what's called the campus carry bill, and the fact that the Committee on the Judiciary had recommended that it be referred to Committee on Finance, and there was a motion to essentially withdraw that reference. My purpose in doing this, our committee was pretty serious when we received the fiscal note of over $10 million, $10.3 million, that it be referred to the Committee on Finance to look at that. Now, I know there's a great deal of skepticism about fiscal notes, but we're dealing with our colleges and universities, and the $10 million fiscal note is not an insignificant amount. It's certainly not where I come from. I don't know where you come from. I think it's a dangerous precedent for this body to ignore a fiscal note of that size. We get some fiscal notes that are kind of strange at times, but this was a very detailed fiscal note that was not available. The detail was not available to us as a Judiciary Committee to seriously investigate that. That's really not our job as a Judiciary Committee. It would be a crime in my mind if that money is actually needed and that fiscal note is legitimate, to deny the colleges and universities, and let me mention that's just the colleges and universities. That doesn't take into account the cost to our community and technical colleges. If we deny the opportunity to fully explore that fiscal note and, if necessary, include funding in the budget, if we pass that bill, it sets a dangerous precedent. My instructions as committee chair has always been, if there's a significant fiscal note that's introduced during the course of our process, we refer it to finance. So I don't know why we would make an exception in this case. I think this won't take all that long. It won't derail the bill for those of you who are diehard Second Amendment people and feel like this is a good idea. But I think it's a terrible idea to ignore this type of fiscal note and deny those who prepared it. This was the Higher Education Policy Commission's note. It was obvious they spent some time to come up with it. I think we need to at least look at it and before we discount it, and I would urge that you adopt the amendment, the motion.
The lady from the 49th, August Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While there was some skepticism on the fiscal note, I feel that the gentleman from the 27th is very concerned about this. The bill is already on the finance agenda today, so I would urge adoption of his motion.
The gentleman from the 64th, Douglas Householder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, too, urge adoption of the gentleman from the 27th motion, so we should have the ability to review any fiscal note, so I do urge adoption.
The gentleman from the 1st, Douglas McGeehan. The gentleman from the 22nd, Douglas Jeffries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to rise in opposition to the motion. I'm looking at the fiscal note here, and as far as I can tell, the fiscal note's a made-up fabrication claiming estimated costs to include expenditures for additional police officers, security guards, and staff, protective gear, weapons, metal detectors, vehicles, body cams, lockers, security cameras, door locks, emergency dispatch equipment, and training. If our colleges don't already have this stuff already, then there's a problem. This fiscal note is just being attached to this, claiming that they're going to need these things for more security. If our law-abiding citizens are carrying on campus, which they are already, I mind you, this would just allow them to do it without being expelled or terminated from their jobs. I would urge the rejection of this amendment. Thank you.
The gentleman the 1st, Douglas McGeehan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. With all due respect to the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, I'm going to have to oppose this motion. This fiscal note was derived from the Higher Education Policy Commission, which, if I'm not mistaken, West Virginia University has much influence over. And if I'm not mistaken further, I believe West Virginia University and the lobbyists down here greatly opposed this bill. And if I'm not mistaken, even further, I believe the gentleman from Mercer County, the chair of the Judiciary Committee, greatly opposes this bill. And I see no reason to send it to finance at all. I think it's a fictional fiscal note, and we should reject this motion.
The gentleman from the 10th, Douglas Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The gentleman's concerns that he raised through the fiscal note is the very reason we need to send it to finance, so we can ask those questions about the university and the college system to make sure why this fiscal note is the way it is, and if they aren't already doing it, why they haven't submitted appropriations for that. So I support the gentleman's motion.
Lady from the 50th, Douglas Longstreth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support this motion because it's very appropriate to have anything with a fiscal note sent to Finance. That's what Finance Committee is supposed to look at. Any bill that has a fiscal note, has any money that belongs to the state and to the taxpayers, should go to Finance. So I definitely support this. And yes, we do need to look at the fiscal note on this particular bill. Thank you.
The gentleman at 29th, Douglas Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Regardless of the topic we're talking about, we always follow the process. That's what separates us from people that don't. And the appropriate thing to do here with an 8-figure fiscal note is go through the process. And I respect the chairman's motion. I think it's in good order. And regardless of our feelings on a topic, we've got to respect the process. Let's not fall into the trap that others in this building may have fallen into when they get passionate about an issue and ignore the rules that we've put into place. So let's follow the process. And I urge adoption of the motion.
Does the gentleman 27th, Delegate Schott, wish to close debate on the motion? If not, the question before the House is a motion by the gentleman 27th that the bill be referred to the Committee on Finance. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. No. Ayes have it. The bill is referred to the Committee on Finance. Reports of select committees. Message from the Executive. Message from the Senate. Resolutions. Petitions. Further motions. Bills introduced. Unfinished business. Bills on third reading. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 270, streamlining process for utilities access to DOH rights of way. The gentleman 27th, Delegate Schott, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 270 seeks to make the process for utilities to gain access to DOH rights of way more efficient. As you may recall, two separate bills that have impacted broadband were passed during the 2018 session. Senate Bill 445 addressed utility accommodation leases, and House Bill 4447 was referred to as the Dig Once bill. The bill before you streamlines some of those concepts that were contained in those bills from the 2018 session. After passage of those bills, there were ongoing meetings between the industry and DOH regarding establishing the fair market value that would be paid. After months of negotiations, an agreement was reached, and it was decided that in an effort to advance these services, the fair market value would be set at $0. This bill is the result of those ongoing negotiations and agreement. It provides that fair market value for purposes of utility accommodation leases is $0. The bill also amends 4 sections of the Dig Once article. It adds one definition and amends another definition. It provides that the fair market value that telecommunications carriers must pay to the division is set at $0. It amends notice requirements that a telecommunications carrier applies for when a telecommunications carrier applies for a permit. And finally, it removes references to monetary compensation. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage of the bill.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman, the 5th, Delegate Pethel.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Would the Judiciary Chairman yield to a question?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The question I have, I believe last year there was either a bill or bills that passed here that had to do with this subject. And I know in District 6 there was quite a bit of discussion about certain fees, and I know that public service districts were very upset about what the Division of Transportation initially was saying that they were going to have to pay. And then I believe that Division of Transportation did back off of some of what they had been suggesting. Does this bill, does that address that that scenario that happened last year?
The focus of this bill, to the gentleman, the focus of this bill is telecommunications carriers. It does not really address the question that you raised, or the concern you raised. My understanding, there's still efforts to try to clarify that issue with respect to public service districts, but this bill basically deals with the relationship, so to speak, between the DOH and telecommunications carriers.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 99 ayes, 0 nays, 1 member absent not voting. Majority of those elected having voted in the affirmative, chair declares the bill passed. Clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 270.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the bill take effect from passage.
Lady from the 49th moves the bill be made effective from passage. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 99 ayes, 0 nays, 1 member absent not voting. 2/3 of those elected having voted in the affirmative. Chair declares the bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House and the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 356, requiring maps provide state and federal prosecutors information.
The gentleman from the 35th, Dr. Capito, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Currently, the West Virginia Code forbids information from being released that may be hurtful to an employee of the state. Recently, there was a United States Supreme Court case styled Giglio versus the United States, and what we're doing with this bill is trying to bring, with Senate Bill 356, we're trying to bring our code in conformance with the holding in that case, where, and what the bill does, it provides for the disclosure of certain employee information in certain circumstances where the employee has, to the department or agency's knowledge, previously been determined to have engaged in conduct reflecting dishonesty, moral turpitude, bias, prejudice, or other conduct which might be reasonably deemed to constitute impeachment evidence. It does four things. It limits the responsibility of disclosure to circumstances where the agency has knowledge that a past or current employee is being called as a government witness. Second, it requires the agency to supply the name of the employee that is engaged in the conduct which may constitute impeachment evidence. Third, it clarifies that the agency's responsibilities under the section are met by supply of the name to the prosecutor. And fourth and last, it immunizes the agency officials and employees from liability for good faith compliance. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are the members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 99 ayes, 0 nays, 1 member absent not voting. A majority of those elected having voted in the affirmative. Chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 356.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House and the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Senate Bill 358, exempting purchasing division purchases for equipment to maintain security at state facilities.
The gentleman from the 27th, Dr. Schott, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Division of Protective Services currently provides safety and security for individuals who visit, conduct business, or work at the Capitol Complex, where we are today, and other state facilities. Currently, DPS purchases goods through the Purchasing Division of the Department of Administration. What this bill does is it provides the Division of Division of Protective Services with a limited exemption. This is a limited exemption to purchase equipment necessary to maintain security at the Capitol Complex and other state facilities as determined by the Secretary. Only that equipment that's necessary to maintain security at those facilities is exempt from the purchasing requirements. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 99 ayes, 0 nays, 1 member absent not voting. Majority of those elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Senate Bill 358.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House and the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 387, relating generally to extradition.
The gentleman from the 35th, Dr. Capito, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 387 repeals certain sections of the code that deal with extradition, but it's actually creating a new section of code where we're going to put that, which will be, it's adding it to section chapter 62, new article 14A, and the only substantive change to this section of code would be, it would provide that individuals that are located in other states who are improperly released from custody before completion of the sentence are subject to extradition. It's the bill, Mr. Speaker. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 98 ayes, 1 nay, 1 member absent not voting. Majority of those elected having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 387.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Senate Bill 452, supplemental appropriation to Second Chance Driver's License Program.
The gentleman from the 10th, Doug Chris, to explain the bill.
Good morning. The purpose of this supplemental appropriation is to increase special revenue spending authority to the expenditure in fiscal year 2019 in the following fund: DMAPS, Division of Justice, Community Services, Second Chance, Driver's License Program account, current expenses $100,000. For you new members, even though monies may be in an account, we have to authorize the spending authority for these funds, and we do that on a normal basis on supplemental appropriations. The fund was generated by fees paid by the participants in the program. More spending authority is due to increase participation that was anticipated. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage of the bill.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 98 ayes, 1 nay, 1 member absent not voting. Majority of those elected having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Senate Bill 452.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Lady from the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill take effect from its passage.
Lady from the 49th moves the bill be made effective from passage. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 98 ayes, 1 nay, 1 member absent not voting. Two-thirds of those elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2515, exempting the sale and installation of mobility-enhancing equipment from the sales and use tax.
The gentleman from the 14th, Doug Butler, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2515 would exempt from state sales and use tax the sale and installation of mobility-enhancing equipment installed in a new or used motor vehicle for the use of a person with physical disabilities. This would also include parts and service on that equipment. And what this would be is, in the case of someone who has a wheelchair ramp or something like that attached to a van, it ensures that we're not forcing those people to pay sales tax for that medically necessary equipment. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 99 ayes, 0 nays, 1 member absent not voting. Majority of those members present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2515.
Are there amendments to the title?
Committee on Finance moves to amend the title.
The question before the House is the adoption of the title amendment. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes have it. The chair declares the title amendment adopted. The title as amended by the House will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action to the House and the Senate and request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2667, supplemental appropriation to Department of Military Affairs and Public Safety, Division of Corrections.
The gentleman is 64th, Doug Householder, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this supplementary appropriation is to appropriate $20,609,836 in general revenue for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2019 to the Department of Military Affairs and Public Safety for expenditure during the fiscal year 2019 in the following fund: Department of Military Affairs and Public Safety, Division of Corrections, Correctional Units, current expense
$20,609,836. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman from the 60th, Douglas Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman please yield? Yes, sir. Could you give us a quick rundown of what that money has been spent on?
It's being spent for the regional jail bills is what it's being spent for.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 99 ayes, 0 nays, 1 member absent not voting. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2667.
Are there members of the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the bill take effect from its passage.
The lady from the 49th moves that the bill be made effective from passage. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 99 ayes, 0 nays, 1 member absent not voting. 2/3 of those elected having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2854, exempting sales from the consumer sales and service tax and use tax by not-for-profit volunteer school support groups raising funds for schools.
The gentleman from the 10th, Chris, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill was prepared at the request of the State Tax Division. The bill exempts sales for not-for-profit volunteer school support groups from the consumer sales, service, and use tax when the sale is for the purpose of raising funds for schools, regardless of whether the organization holds or does not hold an exemption under the 501c3 or 501c4 of the Internal Revenue Code. The bill adds that the limitation that these fundraisers last no more than 14 consecutive days and be held not more than 18 times during a 12-month period. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 99 ayes, 0 nays, 1 member absent not voting. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2854.
Are there members of the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House and the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2855, allowing rebate monies to be used for the operation and maintenance of accounting and transparency systems of the state auditor.
The lady from 38th, Graves, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So this bill would amend the provisions of code relating to the purchasing card fund, which is administered by the state auditor. The bill would specify that the monies in the fund can be used to pay for the operation and maintenance of accounting and transparency systems. Current language provides that the monies may be used for the implementation and operation of the purchasing card program, the general operation of the state auditor's office, and expenses incurred by spending units associated with the use of the purchasing card. In essence, this is an abundance of caution bill by the state auditor's request that just allows him very explicitly, since he already has general operation is covered under current law. This is just making sure we can spend that money for accounting and transparency purposes. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 99 ayes, 0 nays, 1 member absent not voting. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2855.
Are there members of the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2856, relating to the administration of the operating fund of the Securities Division of the Auditor's Office.
Lady from 38th, Graves, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bill would amend the provisions of code relating to the administration of the operating fund of the Auditor's Securities Division. The bill would change the amount of money from that account that is transferred to general revenue. Current law requires that at the end of any fiscal year, any amount in the account that is in excess of 50% of the prior fiscal year's appropriation is to be transferred into general revenue. This bill would change that to any amount in excess of 20% of the gross revenues from the special operating fund operations. And I will bring to the body's attention that the fiscal note on this was 0. It's not expected to have a fiscal impact. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 99 ayes, 0 nays, 1 member absent, not voting. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, and chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2856.
Are there amendments to the title?
Committee on Finance moves to amend the title.
Question before the House is the adoption of the Finance Committee title amendment. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes have it. Chair declares the title amendment adopted. Title as amended by the House will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate and request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2886, establishing requirements for a Division Motor Vehicles Office or Division of Motor Vehicles Now kiosk to be present in the county.
The gentleman from the 56th, Douglas Howell, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of the bill is to require the counties with a population of 25,000 or greater to have a Division of Motor Vehicle Office within the county unless there is a DMV office within 25 miles of the county seat. The bill also requires counties with a population of less than 25,000 to install a DMV Now kiosk unless the county seat is within 25 miles of a DMV location. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman from the 10th, Chris.
Will the gentleman yield?
Gentleman does yield.
How many counties are we talking about?
It looks like about, I think, 13, if I remember correct. Yeah, 13.
And do we know the cost of these kiosks?
The fiscal note that we received, we asked DMV to redo it. It's about $40,000 per kiosk. However, the kiosk generates revenue of $3 per transaction, and they did not factor in them doing any transactions at all. So we requested an additional updated fiscal note. We have not received it.
Okay, thank you very much.
The gentleman from the 26th, Douglas Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield?
Gentleman does yield.
So how does this affect the counties that have less than 25,000 that have an existing office?
It does not.
So the office in McDowell County would remain as it is?
That's correct.
Thank you very much, Mr.
The gentleman from the 9th, Douglas Holland.
Will the chairman yield? The 25 miles, how was that measured? Is that road miles or straight line?
I believe they did road miles.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? Does the gentleman wish to close debate? Question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 98 ayes, 0 nays, 2 members absent not voting. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2886.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate, request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2907, requiring a form of a certified commitment order to the Division of Correction and Rehabilitation.
The gentleman of 35th, Doug Capito, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The committee substitute for House Bill 2907 deals with commitment orders that are sent to the Department or the Division of Corrections, Currently, our circuit clerks are required to send commitment orders to the Division of Corrections, but there are no such commitment orders for misdemeanors. The bill amends the current form. These are forms that a judge generally will fill out and provide. And what this bill does is it edits or amends the form. It fixes references to the Division of Corrections, clarifies that the commitment paper must be signed by the circuit judge. It amends the language to reflect that the Division of Corrections and Rehabilitation will be paying the cost of incarceration from the calendar date following the date of conviction, and it allows the circuit clerk to email commitment order, bringing us into the 21st century. The bill also does add a new section to deal with the missing form that we do, or for the form that we do not currently have for misdemeanors. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage of the bill.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 99 ayes, 0 nays, 1 member absent not voting. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2907.
Are there members of the title?
Delegate Schott moves to amend the title.
The question before the House is the adoption of the title amendment. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes have it. Chair declares the title amendment adopted. The title as amended by the House will be in the remainder of the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action to the House and the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2924, permitting the West Virginia Tourism Office to decide to contract with the Division of Highways to sell advertising space on the West Virginia 511 website.
The gentleman of 56, Douglas Howell, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to permit the West Virginia Tourism Office to contract with the Division of Highways to sell advertising space on WV511's website. 50% of the money collected by the Office of Tourism will be deposited in the Tourism Promotion Fund, and the remaining half will be given to the Division of Highways. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 99 ayes, 0 nays, 1 member absent not voting. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2924.
Are there members of the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be in the remainder of the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action to the House and the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2929, authorizing the West Virginia Tourism Office to enter into an agreement with Division of Highways to provide staff at the Welcome Centers.
The gentleman from 56, Douglas Howell, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of the bill is to allow the West Virginia Tourism Office to enter into an agreement with the Division of Highways to provide staff at welcome centers and highway rest areas, and to create displays promoting the state tourism at welcome centers and rest areas. I urge passage.
The question for the House is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman from the 10th, Douglas Chris.
Will the gentleman yield?
The gentleman does yield.
In this agreement, is the Highway Department furnishing funds to pay these people, or is the tourism going to continue to pay?
It still would be through tourism. It would be through tourism.
All right, thank you.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, the question for the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 99 ayes, 0 nays, 1 member absent not voting. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2929.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be in the remainder of the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House and the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2933, modifying the criminal penalties imposed on a parent, guardian, or custodian for child abuse resulting in injury.
The gentleman at 27th, Douglas Schott, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill modifies the penalties for abuse and neglect crimes. It's in response to some horrific incidents of abuse where the available criminal penalties were not proportionate to the crime. This bill provides higher penalties to address that concern. Let me just mention it was this statute modification has been requested by several of our prosecuting attorneys. As we discussed yesterday, there were some inconsistency in the code with respect to repeat offenders. However, we did address that by floor amendment yesterday. So what this bill does now is enhance the penalties for abuse and neglect crimes, especially those that lead to death or serious bodily injury. and it provides our prosecutors with the tools necessary to penalize these horrific crimes, hopefully deter some of them before they occur. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 99 ayes, 0 nays, 1 member absent not voting. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2933.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate and request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2954, defining certain terms used in insurance.
The gentleman from the 28th delegate Pack to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before us is House Bill 2954. The purpose of this bill is to clarify that a valid license includes a temporary permit issued by the Board of Medicine or the Board of Osteopathic Medicine. This change is to address an issue with health insurance payers. Currently, some health insurance payers will not begin the enrollment process for credentialing and billing purposes until the licensee has a permanent license. This causes months-long delays and adds to hospital recruitment issues. That is the bill, Mr. Speaker. I urge its passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 99 ayes, 0 nays, 1 member absent not voting. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2954.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate and request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2982, amending and updating the laws relating to auctioneers.
The gentleman from the 56th, Douglas Howell, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to amend and update the laws relating to auctions by providing for exemptions to license requirements, providing for June 30 as the date all license expire, establishing certain conditions for auctioneers to continue working after license expiration, providing for auctioneers to submit to background checks, providing for penalties for unlicensed auctioneers and additional circumstances to revoke a license, providing for written contracts with auctioneers and owners of property, and providing for auction houses and business entities to enter into contracts with auctioneers. These changes were all at the request of the agency. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 98 ayes, 1 nay, 1 member absent not voting. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2982.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate and request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3007, authorizing the Commissioner of Agriculture to require background checks.
The gentleman from the 56th, Douglas Howell, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to permit the Commission of Agriculture to require federal and state background checks for applicants seeking to have a position with the Department of Agriculture. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. Of this question, there are 95 ayes, 4 nays, 1 member absent not voting. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3007.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate and request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 3039, relating to a court's consideration of the expression of preference by a child in certain child custody matters.
The gentleman from the 15th, Douglas Foster, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 3039. This bill amends 2 sections of code. First, in West Virginia Code 489206, which is the allocation of custodial responsibility of a child. The court already has the discretion to consider the firm reasonable preference of a child who is under the age of 14. It specifies 14, but in the discretion of the court under 14. So what was removed there was the reference to the age 14 in that section, since the court already has the ability to have a child under the age of 14 considered. Then in West Virginia Code 489402, which is the modification of a parenting plan. This section deals with the modification of, the bill removes the reference to the age of the child, the age of 14 in this section. The bill amends the section so that the party may file a petition for modification before a child turns 14. However, if that child is under the age of 14, the determination to whether the child is sufficiently mature enough to intelligently express a voluntary preference is left up to the judge. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
The question for the House is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman from the 55th, Douglas Spinagle.
Will the gentleman yield for some questions?
Gentleman does yield for questions.
Yes. What's the intent of the legislation?
The intent of the legislation?
Yes.
Is to allow a child under the age of 14. So, as described in West Virginia Code 489402, allowing that child under the age of 14 to, or the parent of that child to request a modification if the child has a significant preference.
Current law, which has been on the books for decades, is the age of 14. When a child reaches the age of 14, which is typically high school, they have the right to decide which parent they want to reside with. And that's the age of 14. Prior to that, the court will weigh various things. By eliminating the age of 14, what are you attempting to do?
Exactly as I just said, for a modification of a parenting plan. They are allowed, it doesn't affect when they're allowed to have that, when you're considering allocation of custodial responsibility. That section isn't changed because the court still has the ability to make that discrepancy that under the age of 14 they can have that discretion to allow the child's preference to be considered. Now, in the modification of a parenting plan, currently they're barred from doing that if the child is below age 14. The court doesn't have that discretion.
Well, the court does have the ability to interview the child and take into account what their interests are when they move. The 14 time period that's an immediate trigger. They grant you a change of circumstances to go in and modify the parenting plan if the child wants to reside with the other parent. Is it your intent to remove that as a trigger, change of circumstances, and just leave it up in the air whenever the child wants to make a move that the parents will go to court all the time?
It's not. It's a trigger, as in it's barred being under on a modification of a parenting plan.
It's what?
If they're under the age of 14, it says that they can make a modification of a parenting plan as long as the child is over the age of 14 on the parent.
There's two ways you can do it. You have to show a change of circumstances, a modification, or a modification without a change of circumstances. One of the change of circumstances is at the age of 14, the child can immediately decide that's a trigger that they can go in and tell the preferences to the court. You are striking that out altogether as a trigger mechanism to go in for a modification of parenting plan. Are you saying that now anytime that the child decides that they want to go to another parent, irrespective of age, you're just telling the family court they have to hear the parents go back before the court?
What it does is allow the discretion of the court, and if I'll have to pull the language up for you here. Give me just 1 second. It says, in the discretion of the court, is sufficiently mature that he or she can intelligently express a voluntary preference. So it's under the child at all ages can have that preference, but has to be sufficiently mature in the discretion of the court.
So if a child's 7 years old and tells one parent they want to go back in, that can be a trigger to go back in and modify it. If a child's 9 years old, they can tell the parent that. 10, 11, 12. Typically, we put, most states, all right, put a time period out there, let's say 14, that you're not 18 years of age. Remember, you're a minor. You can't enter into contracts, but you're in high school, and they will give a firm preference. That's typically why there's a ton of case law on this, but that's why that 14-year marker's there. If it's your intent to remove that, then you're going to intensify parents going back into the family courts all the time on the wishes of the child, because it's going to be left up to discretion to a family court whether or not the child's mature enough or not to make that decision. And that's your intent, correct?
And that's what it's doing, is allowing the child to have a preference and be considered in court, basically, if the court determines that the child is mature enough.
But they don't have to. I guess what I'm saying is,
they don't have to be the age of 14.
Let's say you are married and you have a wife, and then you divorce and you had to say one child, okay, and say you have a custody agreement. Then at the age of 8, say your son says, "Dad, I want to live with you full time." Then that's a trigger for you to file and go into the modification of parenting plan based on the wishes of an 8-year-old.
That is ability to request the modification, yes.
Okay, thank you.
The gentleman is 60th, Douglas Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman continue to yield?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. If this bill were passed and the the arbitrary trigger were removed at the age of 14, would that require the judge to succumb to a 7-year-old's wishes and put them with whichever parent they asked for?
No, it would not.
Oh, okay. So the judge still has discretion?
Yes, the judge has discretion.
Request permission to speak to the bill, sir?
Yes, the judge has discretion, and as listed before, the discretion of the court is sufficient, and this is whether that they're sufficiently matured so that he or she can intelligently express a voluntary.
Oh, so the judge still gets to decide in his discretion or her discretion whether the child is sufficiently mature to make the decision?
Yes, that's correct.
Or to make the request, anyway. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Permission to speak to the bill, sir?
Gentleman may proceed.
As a father of 9 kids, as a divorced father of 9 kids, I can guarantee you that my 7-year-olds at each point in their lives knew where they needed to be. They knew their parents. They knew their parents better than the judge did. They knew their parents better than the attorneys did. And they knew where they belonged. Please pass this bill. Thank you, sir.
The gentleman from the 55th, Douglas Spinagle.
I would urge you to vote no. I appreciate the attorney job bill here that you're getting ready to do, because you're going to pick up litigation all throughout the state. 1 in 2 divorces end in or 1 in 2 marriages end in a divorce. Typically, they will have children, and they will be going back into court at all times with a kid possibly manipulating the parent one way or the other. We have these time periods in there so that the child has some type of maturity when they go to make that decision. The court can weigh it. The court interviews them under our Supreme Court rules prior to the age of 14, and they will give certain preferences to the child. But to make it just to trigger any whims of a child at any given age can go back into court, you're going to have parents of children going to family court all the time. Some of this stuff's tried to stop the frivolous actions that go on. The delegate from the 60th just stated that his child knew which parent they were supposed to be with. Well, I'd suspect his ex-spouse probably felt the same way. The child wanted to be with them. Told them that such thing, so they could go in and file in court. You're constantly in litigation. I don't believe that's in the best interest of kids. I think at some point in time you got to have maturity to know what you're doing. That's typically why we've done the age of 14. So I'm going to vote no, but y'all can increase the litigation in the state.
The gentleman from the 20th, Douglas Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the sponsor yield for a question?
Sponsor does yield.
Yes.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. I want to start by asking, do you think it's typically in the best interest of a child to have a relationship with both parents?
I do.
And you're talking about eliminating the hard line of a 14-year-old's preference in the code, if I understand you. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm eliminating the 14 years old for the modification of a parenting plan alone. The language is changed in the Section 206, but that doesn't actually change the allocation of custodial responsibility. It just changed in the modification of a parenting plan request.
Well, let's say a child is 10, and he tells his mother or father, who it will be, that I want to live with you. I don't want to go see the other mother or father, whatever the situation may be. Have you given any thought or any type of provision what you would do to ensure that the adverse parent in that situation receives reasonable visitation under your scenario?
And that's what I'm looking at here. It's just something that the judge can consider. So it's not even considered if the child's under the age of 14 for a modification.
Currently or in your legislation?
Currently, so by removing that 14, the child's preference can be considered for a modification under the age of 14.
I understand currently. I'm asking if your bill would pass. Have you given any thought that the adverse parent, what would you do to ensure that they receive some type of reasonable visitation with their children?
And this is something that's decided by the judge, but the issue here is, I mean, that's not the issue that's addressed here, 50-50 parenting. I had another bill that didn't make it through on that. This bill doesn't address that section.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? Does the gentleman on the 15th wish to close debate?
Yes. On this bill, what it's doing is just allowing the child's preference to be heard when the child's under the age of 14 for a modification of a parenting plan. And what that would do is allow a parent to request a modification to the parenting plan if the child had a specific reason that they wanted to be with a parent. And obviously if the child was 4 or 5 years old or even 10, 11 years old and said, well, I want to live with mommy because she has more candy, or I want to live with daddy because she has more candy, well, the judge would rule that the child isn't mature enough to make that decision. That's not a reasonable suggestion. So I would urge passage of the bill and give the children the option to have their preferences heard under the age of 14.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine.
The following have paired in accordance with House Rule 43. Delegate Queen, yea. Delegate Byrd, nay.
Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 55 ayes, 44 nays, 1 member absent not voting. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 3039.
Are there members of the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action to the House and the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 3083, adding temporary work during a legislative session as exclusion to the term employment for purposes of unemployment compensation.
The gentleman from 35th, Doug Capito, to explain the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hope this presentation of this bill doesn't render me unpopular with some of those that are sitting around us. But this bill does deal with unemployment benefits, unemployment compensation. And for an individual to be entitled to unemployment benefits, the claimant must have been engaged in employment, believe it or not. But employment is defined in the code, and what we are doing here is we are adding to a type or a class of group that would be exempt as employees under this section. And this deals with specifically per diem employees in the legislature. And the bill simply adds the individuals that are serving in a temporary base in the legislature during the legislative session, and they would be excluded from this section of code, and they would be excluded under the defined term employment, so and therefore would not be entitled to unemployment benefits. I would add, lastly, Mr. Speaker, that there are other exempted classes in this section of code, which includes other elected officials, temporary emergency response individuals, legislators, and judges. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage of the bill.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 68 ayes, 29 nays, 3 members absent not voting. A majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 3083.
Are there members of the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate and request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 3093, relating to standards for factory-built homes.
The gentleman from the 28th, Doug Pack, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before us is House Bill 3093. This bill changes the phrase
residential design standards to any ordinance or regulation. The bill is designed to address a West Virginia Supreme Court holding which found that the phrase, a residential design standards, was insufficient to prohibit a municipality from enacting ordinances which discriminate against factory-built housing as this body originally intended in 2006. That is the bill, Mr. Speaker. I urge its passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are the members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 97 ayes, 1 nay, 2 members absent not voting, a majority of those present having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 3093.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate and request concurrence therein. Are there further bills on third reading? If not, bills on second reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 13 relating to distributions from state excess lottery fund.
Are there amendments?
Committee on Finance moves to amend the bill. This is H. Fin AM.
The gentleman of 64th Doggett Householder to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment is technical in nature, and I urge adoption.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. Are the members who wish to speak to the amendment? If not, those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes have it. Chair declares the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments?
Delegate P. Martin moves to amend the bill. This is HFAP Martin number 12-21.
Does the gentleman, the 46th Delegate Martin, wish to explain the amendment?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to explain this bill a little bit, what this bill does is it talks about the excess lottery fund and where the money of the lottery fund goes to. Well, what this bill does is it adds $11 million to go to the purse fund for breeding horses and things. What I want to do with my amendment is I want to take that $11 million that was allocated inside of this account, and I want to give it back to the county boards of education equally, so they are able to do what they want with this money. It's $200,000 for every county, and Mr. Speaker, I ask the right to close, and I'll yield to questions. Thank you.
The gentleman of 64th Doggett Householder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to urge rejection of the amendment. We had similar amendments in finance, for example, directing this money to PEIA, to fixing potholes, et cetera, you name it. The bill provides for the distribution of excess lottery funds into purse funds at the individual racetracks. So therefore, I urge rejection.
The gentleman, the 14th, Doggett Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge adoption of the amendment. Reason being is when I go back to my district, if I created a list of the things that we should be applying money to, I would say breeding dogs and horses would be, or purses for dogs and horse tracks would be way down the list. I think that purpose of education, as we've seen for the past several weeks since we've been here, is very important. So I would urge adoption.
The gentleman, the 10th, Dr. Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We need to remember that obligations that past legislatures have done enter into consequences for us. These monies originally were taken away from the breeders to help with the workers' comp fund, trying to make sure that we take care of the past sins of the state-run workers' comp. Those funds now have been collected over the last 13, 14, 15 years, and now we've got that fund in a pretty good shape. The obligation at that time, and I think 2005 or so, was that once this fund was taken care of, we would put this money back, give it back to the breeders of both horses and dogs so they can have in their funds for purses. This is an economic development process because the higher the purses, the more we attract out-of-state people to come to our tracks. Please reject this amendment.
The gentleman, the 67th, Doggett Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The gentleman from Wood, Delegate Chris, is absolutely correct. I'm going to add a little bit to the history. This has never been the state's money to distribute. When the racetrack slots were adopted and then passed by referenda in the 4 counties that have racinos, and later table games, which were once again ratified by the voters in the 4 counties with racinos, the decision was made that part of the reason for letting the racetracks have casinos was to support the racing industry. So we took the money, part of the money that would have gone to the tracks as profit, and dedicated it directly to the purse fund and the breeders fund. The only reason it ended up in the state's coffers was to make sure that it got where the legislature wanted it to go. So for that, and when the gentleman from Wood is correct, when we took it for workers' comp, it was interesting. At that point, the racing industry was fairly healthy, so not too many people complained too hard about it. Some people did. But they were given the absolute assurance that once workers' comp was paid off, the money would go back to where the legislature intended. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 25th, Delegate Painter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor of the amendment yield?
Sponsor does yield. Sure.
Thank you, sir. Will this $11 million, will this be annually or is this one-time money?
This is every year.
Okay. Speak to the bill.
Gentleman may proceed.
Okay. With everything we've went through this year, we got a decision here. We're going to prioritize racing or are we going to prioritize education? As much as I like racing, education, them having some rough times right now. This is kind of an easy decision here, so I will be supporting the gentleman's amendment.
The gentleman of 36, Delegate Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chairman yield?
Chairman of Finance.
Yes, sir.
Gentleman does yield.
Chairman, where's now we have an excess lottery fund. Where does that money go typically if it's not directed into any certain fund or any certain department?
Could you restate your question again?
Right now we have an excess lottery fund, right? Do we have any certain requirements? Do we have to send that money to certain places?
Yes, that's what's in the entire statute.
Okay, so what are those? Is there like a vague, I mean, from what I've heard, I think it's been stated to me that we have to send excess lottery funds to veterans, seniors, and education. Is that true?
Exactly, yes.
That's true?
Yes, that's true.
So if this $11 million would not be placed somewhere, it would go towards education, seniors, or veterans, correct? Because it's not being spent on the workers' comp right now. We're not paying down the workers' comp debt yet, or anymore.
The bucket list that you're referring to is regular lottery. This is excess lottery. So
excess lottery, it goes back to general fund. We can spend it as we see fit.
$65 million goes back to general revenue.
Okay, so this $11 million would be part of that 65?
No.
So this is just excess. It's just in an excess lottery fund.
That's correct.
Okay. The purse contributions, and this comes from video lottery, correct?
Not necessarily.
No?
No.
Now, what kind of contributions did we give to the horsemen in 2018? Do you know what that number was?
I do not.
I was going to wait for council to be looking up something and see if he found it for you.
Where's it at? It appears that $11 million went to the licensed racetrack regular purse fund.
Okay. Well, now I've got a number here that came from Video Lottery. Did they also receive $46 million from Video Lottery? Maybe $43 million in 2017 and $50 million in 2016?
Are you asking if that $43 million went into excess lottery fund?
No, I'm asking if there were contributions to the Horsemen's Fund of a total of $46.71 million in 2018.
Yeah.
From video lottery.
I would not have that information.
You wouldn't have the information. What other pots do we contribute to the Horsemen's Fund from, other than maybe this $11 million that we might add to it?
Sir, I can't answer that right now at this time.
Okay. So we don't know how much money we're giving to them, but we're going to add $11 million more?
Sort of. This is fulfilling a promise that was taken from them. This is all we're doing. We're going back to the promise that was made.
Promise. What year was that promise made?
I believe 2005.
2005. So I was a freshman in college, maybe still in high school. Were you in the House of Delegates in 2005?
I was not.
Okay. Do you think we should figure out how much money we're giving them before we give them $11 million more?
Once again, to the gentleman, this is for purse funds. This is going back to the way it was in 2005, the promise that we made.
Back when I was in high school?
Back when you were in high school.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Would the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Delegate, what were you doing in 2005?
That was 6 years before I graduated, so I was still in middle school.
You were in middle school? So most of these horsemen hang out at the track, I think. You go to the track when you're in middle school?
Nope.
Did you make any promises to the horsemen or the Horsemen Association when you were in high school, middle school?
Gentleman 56 may state his point.
What we were doing in 2005 when this legislature made a promise is irrelevant to the current bill.
Gentleman acknowledges that the point is well taken.
Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you.
Does the gentleman wish to continue with questions that
I'd
are
like
in
to
order?
speak to the amendment, sir.
Gentleman may continue.
I understand that promises were made back in 2005, and I understand that the day before the last day of session last year, there was a bill that came through judiciary, and again they were trying to grab $11 million and stick it back in this fund. I would suggest to you that there is already a lot of money dedicated to the Horsemen's Fund. I have a chart here that in 2018 they got $46.71 million. In 2017 they got $43.10 million. 2016, $50.56 million. 2015, $55.72 million. And that's just from video lottery proceeds. And I'd like to think that instead of taking another $11 million, that we take up the gentleman's amendment and send this to our Board of Education, and maybe we'll get a couple new iPads, maybe we'll get some new textbooks, but maybe that'll do better there than in horseshoes or whatever else. Thank you.
The gentleman of 32nd, Doug Fast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Vice Chairman of Finance yield for question?
Vice Chairman does yield.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Regarding what you said a little bit ago about the workers' compensation debt, I wasn't here in 2005 either, but I would like to know the $11 million that was diverted towards the workers' compensation debt. There was also money diverted from the timber industry, the gas industry, and the coal industry, correct?
And a list of others.
And we've been in the process of restoring those funds.
That's exactly right.
Okay. My question regarding the gambling industry, the $11 million, when that money was diverted, was that a one-time $11 million diversion, or was that an annual perpetual diversion of $11 million?
It was annually, and I assume it was purse funds that was derived to workers' comp.
Was that, were those PERS funds an annual diversion of $11 million each year?
Yes, it was.
And so that's 11 million times multiple years up to the current year.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And this,
you brought, and also to interrupt you, you brought up another point. These other industries had the similar situations that we had to pay in excess workers' comp fees above. Once we went private for workers' comp, we all assessed an excess fee for that time period too. So this is the last component, I believe, of returning those funds back to the appropriate places before the 2005 change.
okay, and so the bill before us that is now the amendment pending, if it passes, it would be $11 million in perpetuity, not just replacing the 11 times how many years it was of $1 million.
That's correct. All you're doing is redirecting the money back to where the original situation was.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you.
I'd have to support the amendment.
The gentleman of 66, Douglas Espinoza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd also rise to respectfully urge rejection of my colleague's amendment. I believe that the amendment, if adopted, would essentially perpetuate a wrong that was perpetrated against horsemen several years ago. And again, our Vice Chairman of Finance has pointed out that this legislature went to a number of industries, including the horse racing industry, several years ago in an effort to retire this workers' compensation fund debt. The coal industry, the timber industry, I believe the natural gas industry, and the horsemen and greyhound, the kennel operators as well. And I think arguably you could say that the horsemen, the kennel operators, really did not contribute to the creation of that unfunded liability, but they nevertheless agreed to, pardon the pun, pony up and help retire that debt. And so each of those industries were assessed an annual contribution to pay down that debt. So when the debt was finally retired here a year or so ago, you'll recall that the legislature honored the promise to those industries that contributed to paying down that workers' compensation fund liability. Every one of them had their assessment ended, the funding restored, with the exception of our racing industry. So this, again, this amendment would have the effect of perpetuating that really unfair, inequitable treatment for our horse industry, our greyhound industry, that did their part in helping retire this debt. This is a matter of really restoring funds that they previously were receiving, and I would urge rejection of the gentleman's amendment.
The gentleman of 35th, Douglas Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Chairman of Finance yield? So with many of these line items, as it relates to lottery, excess lottery, we have what's called above and below the line. Correct. So my question is, with the bill or with the amendment, are these dollars taken away from debt service coverage? Because there are a number of dollars that are backing up not only state parks, but as you well know, multiple millions of dollars of debt service.
Yeah, we met with the lottery, and the lottery officials believe that this will not affect their debt service.
Do not believe. So it was not a yes or no.
That's a yes. It will not affect their debt service.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman of 56, Douglas Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chair of Finance yield. Now, it's my understanding that this money all goes back into the purses. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
So what we're going to do is effectively raise the purses and attract more, I guess, more prominent horses and more gamblers to gamble on horse racing and everything to
Absolutely, and it helps the racing industry.
And yesterday was Tourism Day, and every dollar that we put into tourism, we get back eightfold.
You're absolutely correct.
So if we take this money out of the purses, we actually could be cutting future revenues from gambling, which also go into education, senior services, and what we heard here today.
You're absolutely correct.
Thank you, sir.
The gentleman, the first, Douglas Schwartzmiller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And for the record, I was here in 2005. And I remember the bill, and I remember how it worked. It was privatizing workers' comp, and there was a debt that came with that. And we had to find a funding mechanism because, quite frankly, it wasn't fair to put it onto the taxpayers. So the mechanism was that business would pay into a fund until that fund was retired. And once it was retired, the money that was coming away from their coffer would then be reinstated. And it's pretty much happened with coal. Not that anybody got up and offered an amendment then. It was done with gas. Probably no amendment. So you see, and I could go on with the other ones, but I think you get the point. You see, now we're back to the racetracks. To the gentleman from the 14th, that probably is down on your list, because those people and those jobs in that area, they're not from your area. So I wouldn't expect you to want to stick up for those jobs there. But you know what? My colleague from the first and I, those folks are from our area. Those jobs, that income, that domino effect from those jobs. So by giving them back, giving them back what we took, who wants to oppose that? Who wants to say we gave it back to everybody else, but we're not going to give it back to them because they don't deserve it? Because with some people, they're way down on the list. Well, you want to know something? They're up here on my list. The horsemen, those jobs, those are important to me. They're important to my colleague. They're important to the Northern Panhandle. And I would ask you all to oppose this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman, the 55th, Douglas Bonagle.
Will the chairman of finance yield, please?
Yes.
We had a good bit of discussion about this bill up in finance. One of the things that was my understanding too during the testimony that the horseman took a haircut here about 4 or 5 years ago. Is that
2014.
correct? And that was to balance our budget at that particular time, correct?
You're correct. Yes.
And how much, do you recall what was $10, $15 million that they got hit then?
I don't recall off the top of my head.
Okay. And as a result of that, and that was directly affecting the purses, their industry has gone down substantially. Is that correct?
You're right. And to the gentleman, keep in mind, and to the other members, that if the racing industry suffers, let's just say it goes in complete decline, that affects the casinos. I mean, that puts everything at jeopardy as far as all revenue that we're talking about.
And this is not just the horses, it's also the dogs.
You're exactly correct.
So it's all 4 of the casinos across the state, correct?
That's right. So we have to keep the industry alive.
And there's thousands of jobs tied to thousands and thousands of jobs tied to the horse industry and the dog industry.
There's ancillary jobs like the feed industry, hay, straws. Exactly.
It's a big agricultural.
Absolutely.
And I think the testimony was at committee that if you invest in the purses, then that's investing in agriculture in these particular areas, and they'll be able to start growing, because when the purse sizes, you have a larger purse and you have more investment into the horses, because there's a lot of expenses investing in those horses. And if they can't recoup it on the purse size, if they say they run a good horse or a good dog or whatever, then it doesn't make financial sense for them to do it, so they've left the state.
Well, you're right, and that's why the Farm Bureau and many other organizations endorses and supports this industry, because it's exactly what you said.
And the money itself that we're we're talking about. I think the gentleman from the 67th brought up that it's generated from the track, and the state just acts like an accountant. We just collect the money and then just disperse it back down so it goes where it's supposed to go.
You're correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
The lady from the third, Dr. Storch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chairman of finance yield?
Yes.
Thank you. So, as I understand this amendment, it would take money from the PERS funds, which is an investment in our racing industry.
You're correct.
And the yield on that investment is substantial into seniors, education, K-12, promise. Is it not?
At some of it, the excess lottery is a refundable tax credit for senior citizens, higher education improvement bonds, school building authority bonds, economic development fund bonds, water development authority, and the parks bond.
So while these jobs, as the gentleman from the first referenced, are mainly in the districts that have the racing industry involved, and also in the bordering districts, because we have several, between the gentleman from the first and my district, we have several farms that are located in the gentleman from the second's district. But that money is spread around all districts in the state as well, isn't it?
You're correct.
And would this create possibly an unfunded mandate if we would divert this money to require us to provide the $11 million to each of the school districts if the racing industry weren't able to maintain the $11 million from this PERS funds?
Well, it's definitely subject to legislative appropriation, which could be detrimental, obviously, to the racing industry.
And are you familiar with Keeneland or Churchill Downs?
I've heard of the racetracks, yes.
Thank you. May I ask a couple questions to the gentleman from the 36th?
Which gentleman from the 36th?
Robinson.
Does the gentleman yield?
Yep.
Gentleman does.
Would you have the numbers for the PERS funds from 2004, 2003, 1988,
1988?
1990. Well, I thought if we're going to go back to when people were in high school, we may as well go back to when I was in high school, so.
I've got back to 2011. I can help you that far.
But you have not pulled any of the PERS funds before the industry graciously took the hit to help the state recover and recoup all the workers' fund old comp debt.
Well, I tell you what I did is I went back to when numbers were double what they were today in 2011 at $84 million that the horsemen were getting, and that was after that 2005, so that's as far back as I went, yes.
Well, I would like to invite you to come up to the West Virginia Derby and check it out.
I'll discuss that with you.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 8th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I agree with the gentleman from the first. I was here in 2005. I was also here in 1996 when we tried to reform workers' compensation. We were imploding. We were going under as a state. By 2004, we realized the reforms of 1996 simply were not going to get the job done. I was here then, too. And in 2005, we moved to retire approximately a $4 billion deficit. And we put special assessments on various industries in this state to help retire this assessment. And from that action this legislature took, it moved us to the place where Wall Street began to improve our bond ratings as we reformed many of the pension systems in this state. And it contributed to a better bond rating from Wall Street, which translates into better interest rates on bonds that are issued. I would oppose the amendment of the gentleman from Lewis. Simply, we have restored those cuts made to the coal industry and other industries over the last few years, and restored them because we have basically paid a $4 billion debt and had a payment plan, and we worked our way out of it, and we worked our way out of it consistently over the years. We have managed the finances of this state. I do not have a racetrack in my county. To the best of my knowledge, no one in my county makes a whole lot of money from racing, unless some farmer there ships some hay to one of the racetracks. So I don't really have a direct dog in that fight. But in a matter of fairness, we have restored and ended the special assessments on various industries. This is the last one where the special assessment really needs to be restored, and so I would respectfully oppose the amendment from the gentleman from Lewis. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 3rd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I join my colleague from the 3rd and many others across the aisle in opposition to this amendment, and it has been sold to us, I believe, as a vote for education if you support it. But judging by excess lottery fund appropriations for fiscal year 2019, we know this much. $29 million went to the Promise Scholarship, $19 million went to public ed, and $15 million went to higher ed. So for a total of $53 million, we've sent to education. Now, with this amendment, you want to hurt the tracks, which will hurt the excess lottery funds, which will hurt education. So, I think it's pretty clear. Although it may look good on the title, the effect is actually very anti-education. Therefore, we must not support the amendment and support education by voting it down. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 60th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chairman please yield?
Yes.
I'm sorry. You know how simple I am. All these complexities have confused me. Can we get down to the basic bare bones of this, please? Where did this? We're talking about $11 million per annum. What is the source of that money? Who created that wealth?
The racetracks.
The racetracks.
Yeah, the horsemen.
So it's their money?
It's their money.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 1st.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. You know, I have to join with my colleague from the 1st, my colleague across the aisle from the 3rd, my colleague right here on my side of the aisle from the 3rd, who evidently stepped out to the restroom, I'm not sure. But this is really about government just living up to its promises. We always hear that joke about, yeah, government's promise is worth, diddly squat. And a promise was made once that workers' compensation fund was retired that this would be restored to the tracks. It was restored to several other industries. Many folks in here, some who have actually spoken in favor of this amendment, come up to my area, come up to the other gentleman from the 1st area, and eat all the free food at the buffet at the Mountaineer to watch the West Virginia Derby. Well, I submit to you that sounds a little bit hypocritical, but really, this is truly about just trying to honor a promise to restore their own money that they basically, in good faith, negotiated to help restore or help retire that debt. And now it's our turn to fulfill that promise once that debt's been retired. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 29th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would have to oppose the amendment. One thing that we have to do is honor our promises. And listening to the folks from the 3rd, the 1st, I don't have a horse track in my area. I'm in the coal fields. We don't have that. But I am sympathetic to your desire to restore something to an industry that's vital to your areas. And I hope we'll remember that here in the next week or two when we start talking about the coal industry. You come down to where I live, all the steel beams in your buildings, they come from Rodale. They come from Sophia. And we're hurting. And we're going to be asking you for some help. And I'm willing to help out everybody from the first and the third today, because I don't have a racetrack where I'm from, but I got people that need your help. The southern part of this state needs your help. And we need to help an industry that has kept this whole place alive. This whole place alive. From the energy coming in through the power lines to the steel beams running through here. It come from our communities, and we're hurting. We didn't get all the new roads. We didn't get all the new service projects. We didn't get all the new sewer lines. We didn't get all the new water lines. We didn't get the big stadiums. What we got is a lot of hurt, a lot of devastation, a lot of drug epidemic. And we got an industry that we're clinging on to for dear life, because it's the only thing helping us. So while we're talking today about the racing industry, I get what you're talking about. This is important to your area, and I'm willing to help you with it, and I'm willing to vote this amendment down. But I hope you guys will remember this here in the next week, because we're going to start talking about the coal industry. And that is vital to not just my area, or the gentleman from the 26th, the 25th, the 27th, the 32nd, the 33rd. You start talking about southern West Virginia, we're hurting, and we're going to need your help. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 63rd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to rise in opposition of this amendment. I want to throw a number out at you. $154 million. That's $154 million that we've asked the horsemen to give up to put into the workers' comp fund if we take that $11 million and times it by the years that they've been giving us that money. So I think that we've asked them to do enough, and it's time for us to return this money to this very integral part of our economy in the Eastern Panhandle. We have a very large trickle-down effect from the tracks. It supports a lot of different industries in our area, and the horsemen over there are in a very tough situation. They're dealing with leaving and going to Maryland and Virginia. So this would be an integral part of money that we could put back into the purses over there to help our horsemen. So I would just rise in opposition of the amendment. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I would like to inform some of the, especially the newer members, may not be aware of this, but some of the members who've been here for a little while, that in addressing the question that this is not the state's money. Actually, if you look at the Constitution, and I like these kind of debates where we actually get the book out, Article 6, Section 36. And I'm not going to read the whole section, but basically what it says here is that the legislature may authorize lotteries which are regulated, controlled, owned and operated by the state of West Virginia. So this is a little bit different kind of business than what any other industry is here. So the fact is that we own the entire industry, and we regulate it by general law. And obviously, we pass laws and we transfer money, we tax, we pass taxes or reduce taxes as a matter of general law. That's what we do here. We make promises, and then we change laws, which changes the circumstances. So actually we break promises. Anybody remember the toll road, the turnpike? That was a promise that was made also. Yet only was a year or two ago, we decided we were going to break that promise because we needed money for roads. Now I didn't support breaking that promise, because I think we've made the promise on the roads, and the roads obviously that's an issue that I get calls about every day. Even while I'm here, I get calls about that every day. And we get calls every day about education issues, especially when we've been here, which is why this amendment is important. And speaking of promises, we cannot bind future legislatures, and past legislatures cannot bind us to promises, even by law, because that's what we do, is we change the laws. And what is the purpose of the lottery? And I lost my page here. If you look at the bill itself, the section that it's in, it states that the lottery fund is created in the state treasury for the purposes of promised scholarship to improve education. It's for senior programs. It's things like that. So this amendment goes directly to the purpose of the lottery. And to the amendment, this amendment is not taking money. What's happening, the bill is taking money out of the general revenue, basically. It's taking money that we would appropriate elsewhere. It took it below the line where we can appropriate it. It's putting it back above the line where we can't get to it anymore. When we had the budget crisis in the last 3 or 4 years, we were scrambling for money, trying not to cut programs that hurt too bad and trying not to increase taxes on the constituents that we all represent here. And I don't think that this is the place to put in another $11 million when we supposedly have a big budget surplus this year, yet as we pass these bills like we passed the bill today to put $20 million into corrections, we have places where this money is much better spent, in my view, and obviously that's why we're here. We're here to make that decision. What is your priority? My priority is, in this case, education, because that's what the amendment before us is, and I urge adoption of the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Gentleman from the second.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I'll be brief today, but I think it was just about a year ago today. I'll try to remember what we said, but I think there was a bill out there that we were literally trying to kill the dog racing industry. And I stood up then and spoke of, I believe there are 66 dog farms in the state of West Virginia. And as my colleagues mentioned, I'm in the second district in a horse track on one side, a dog track on the other. So, you know, when I travel through my district, the dog farms that are on McAdoo Ridge and Windsor Heights and Beach Bottom, they're not just dog farms that appeared here because we asked these people to bring their dogs and to bring this industry to here. So many people reached out to me last year that had moved here from Florida and different places to provide this industry. So they are jobs in my area that concerns me, but also we talk a lot about tourism. And we also talk about the natural gas industry. So, you know, in our area in the Northern Panhandle, in Monaca, Pennsylvania, they're building a $5 billion cracker. And there's proposal of another one in Belmont County, Ohio. So, you know, I mean, we have the opportunity to really grow. And why would we not support an industry that can grow and support and put more money into our education and our seniors? I think the Northern Panhandle is once again ready to boom, as we did in our steel days and paid our fair share of taxes. So I ask to put this amendment down and let us have something for the people that are going to be moving into our area. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 16th, Delegate Linville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. First thing, would the gentleman from 14th yield?
Gentleman yield.
Absolutely.
We discussed this in the Finance Committee, was it, were there priorities actually that were set out in this bill for any excess money in the lottery? Do you recall? Were there any priorities?
Well, I don't remember actually the priorities. The bill itself refers to a couple code sections where initially this was presented to us as being for the thoroughbreds, for the horses, and the horses only. And actually, it turns out it goes for the dog tracks too, and that brings up another issue of whether that money's well spent. But it basically lets them spend it however they want to. But this is for purses and so forth.
Yeah. Well. Would you agree that a promise made in statute or a priority laid out in statute would be as good of a promise as we could make as a legislature for moving forward and what our intent is moving forward with any of these monies?
I would agree with that. I would say a statute is a law. We're passing a law. That's not a promise.
Certainly, certainly. Thank you for that. I would like to direct everyone's attention to page 10 of this bill, lines 241 through 247. And what that states is that the legislature considers the following as priorities in the expenditure of any surplus revenue funds. A, providing salary and/or increment increases for professional educators and public employees. B, providing adequate funding for the Public Employees Insurance Agency. And C, providing funding to help address the shortage of qualified teachers and substitutes in areas of need, both in number of teachers and in subject matter areas. Does this sound familiar to anyone in this room? Folks, not only that, but there's been a lot of questions here asked about fair treatment of taxes. And I would point to the coal industry on this one in very specific part. There's a section of code here, I believe it is 11-2013, and in that it says 75% of the net proceeds of such additional tax on coal shall be deposited in the county coal revenue fund, 25% of which goes to counties which didn't produce the coal. And so what I would say is that if anyone has been unfairly treated, it would be the coal industry. Their revenue that we've been taxing for 100+ years has been redistributed to the rest of this state. Guys, we've stated here what our priorities are. We ad nauseum for almost a dozen hours discussed what the priorities were in education. This amount of money would go almost all the way to where we needed to be for new professional mental health providers, school counselors, all that. What was in the previous bill that's now been tabled indefinitely? I would submit that handing that $200,000 per county essentially down to them, for them to do with as they see fit, could be used for school security. It could be used for more teachers. It could be used for incentivizing teachers. It could be used for new positions for mental health. This one's a no-brainer, guys. We've already talked about what our priorities are. The promise is right there in the statute, and I urge adoption of this amendment. It's simple.
Gentleman from the 67th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to point out that the gentleman who just spoke is absolutely correct that money from the coal severance tax is distributed to every county in the state, as is money from the machines and the table games at the racinos, distributed to every county in the state. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 46th to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. You know, promises made, promises kept. We kept hearing in here that we've made promises here and there. You know who we made promises to? We've made promises to our seniors, to our education, to our boards of education. You know, at the beginning of this session, the chairman of Judiciary had made the motion of sending back a bill to finance to see how much money a bill was going to cost. Well, you know, this is a $11 million bill here. You know, I've heard some people in here talk about, well, we're taking this money away, we're taking this money away, but this is an additional $11 million allocated to this purse fund every year. Every year. This isn't a one-year supplement. This isn't a 1 year. This is every year. $11 million of our tax dollars will be going to a gambling subsidy, to a gambling to gambling horses, and you know, I feel like that this money would be better going to the county boards of education. $200,000. You know, the gentleman from Pendleton County the other day had spoke so passionately about putting police officers inside of these schools. $200,000. You can add counselors inside the schools with this. This money is allowed to be spent for the boards of education. You know, if you wanted counselors, police officers, you know, we talk about books, bonuses for our teachers. This right now is the time to do it. This $200,000 that would be going to these boards of education instead of gambling subsidies will help the teachers, will help protect the children. You know, I think it's kind of funny that these galleries up here were full the other day, or yesterday. We're absolutely full with teachers and school personnel. And you know, people stood up yesterday during remarks and talked about, you know, how wonderful it was down here and how we need to make them a priority. And, you know, and I agree. Right now is a chance for you all to make them a priority. A no vote on this amendment will take away from those people in the galleries. You know, I wish that they were here to see this vote. And Mr. Speaker, I urge passage of this amendment, and I ask for the ayes and nays.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. The ayes and nays have been demanded. Is the demand sustained? The demand is sustained. The question is, shall the amendment be adopted? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? So the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 19 ayes, 78 nays, 3 members absent, not voting. Less than a majority in favor haven't voted in the affirmative. Chair declares the amendment lost. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced. Next bill on second reading.
Senate Bill 442, supplementing, amending, and decreasing appropriation to Insurance Commission.
Are there amendments? The bill will be advanced.
Senate Bill 443, supplemental appropriation of federal monies to DHHR divisions.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Senate Bill 444, supplemental appropriation to DHHR division.
Are there amendments?
Committee on Finance moves to amend the bill. This is H. Fin AM.
The gentleman of the 64th Delegate Householder to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, this amendment is to correct a drafting error that happened. This is requested by DHHR in the Budget Office. The correct amount should be $1,138,304. I urge adoption.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. Are the members who wish to speak to the adoption of the amendment? If not, those in favor of the amendment will say aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes have it. Chair declares the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2532, allowing certain donations by persons reviewing their driver's license or vehicle registration.
Are there amendments? The bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2540, prohibiting the waste of game animals, game birds, or game fish.
Are there amendments? The bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2541, requiring certain safety measures be taken at public schools.
Are there amendments? The bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2730, increasing the compensation of the membership of the state police and the salaries for public school teachers and school service personnel.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2807, creating an additional modification to the West Virginia adjusted gross income of shareholders of S corporations engaged in banking.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2829, relating to the termination of severance taxes on limestone and sandstone.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2837, relating to the licensing of advanced deposit wagering.
Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to postpone action 1 day.
Lady in the 49th, ask unanimous consent that action on House Bill 2837 be postponed 1 day. Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. Action will be postponed 1 day. Next bill on second reading.
House Bill 2872, authorizing law enforcement officers to assist the State Fire Marshal.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2901, allowing for the establishment of a secondary location for racetrack video lottery terminals.
Are there amendments?
Delegate Coles moves to amend the bill.
The gentleman of the 58th, Delegate Coles, to explain the amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My amendment does two things. It limits any new secondary location for racetrack video lottery and any second location for racetrack table gaming to the Wheeling Island Racetrack facility and area. It also limits that or permits the secondary location for 5 years during the construction and the repairs and road construction in that area. We heard testimony up in finance or information that came out of the committee when we worked the bill was that the Wheeling area needed this bill. There's been flooding on the island. There's a sizable, apparently, road construction project in the area, and an alternate location was something that they needed. Without this amendment, however, the bill doubles the locations. The 4 racinos would have the ability to have a secondary location. It would double the locations for table games, double the locations for the racetrack video lottery from the current 4 to 8 whenever you add in the secondary locations. The new locations are what concern me. There are no setbacks,
no buffers for churches, for schools, for daycares. There's no local referendum vote, no citizen input through that process. And for those reasons, Mr. Speaker, I think it's important, it's reasonable and fair, considerate to Wheeling Island Stadium and their specific issues, but therefore I think it's important and I urge adoption of the amendment. Thank you.
The House has heard the primary amendment. Are there amendments to the primary amendment?
Delegates McGeehan and Schwartzmiller move to amend the amendment. This is HFA McGeehan and Schwartzmiller 2-21.
The question before the House is the secondary amendment offered by the gentleman from the first. The gentleman from the first, Delegate McGeehan, to explain the secondary amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Myself and the other gentleman from the first amendment to the amendment simply would strike the words island, or the phrase an island in, and insert in lieu thereof property adjoining. And essentially what that would do to the gentleman from Morgan County's amendment would just allow the racetrack and casino in our district in Hancock County, the Mountaineer, to also have a satellite location within the same county. So if you strike the word island, which essentially limits this just to the Wheeling area, it would also just allow slightly north of Wheeling the Mountaineer to have, if they so choose, to be permitted to have a satellite location within the same county, Hancock County. That's essentially it.
The question before the House is the secondary amendment as just explained by the gentleman from the first. Is there a discussion on the secondary amendment offered by the gentleman from the first? The other gentleman from the first, Douglas Schwartzmiller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would urge adoption. Just as my friend from the Eastern Panhandle alluded to, we were promised $19 million in road money from the governor, and we expect that money to be coming in any time now, and we just want to make sure we're in the same position. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 35th, Doug Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to the secondary amendment. We had good debate on this bill in the committee room upstairs, and while I understand the concern of the gentleman, both gentlemen from the first, it's important that laws like this are evenly applied to stakeholders, and I think this creates an uneven playing field. I think we're picking winners and losers, and I would add, in committee there were amendments proposed before the committee which were overwhelmingly rejected in committee. So I would urge rejection of the same. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 37th, Doug Pushkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman from the first please yield?
Gentleman does yield.
So your amendment, it changes it to, it strikes island. How would it read? Located where?
Yeah, it strikes island, and it serves in lieu of, if you can read the amendment, property adjoining. Essentially, that just means within the same county.
Okay, so you strike the entire reference to the Ohio River?
No, that's not struck. Property adjoining.
So it still has to have a county that has the
yes,
that's
Ohio
correct.
River. That's correct. That's
okay.
correct.
Would you be willing to reform your amendment to include tributaries of the Ohio River?
Hey man, cut a guy a slack. I've had a rough week.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
I'll briefly speak to the amendment.
Gentleman may proceed.
I oppose the amendment and the one it's being attached to. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 58th, Doug Coles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Likewise, I oppose the secondary amendment. I believe the circumstances in Wheeling suggest special consideration during the construction project, as opposed to picking another one that doesn't have those special circumstances. I would prefer to have them all be treated fairly and the same. I just believe strongly that Wheeling Island has special consideration during their construction that's not present in my friend from the first area, and I would urge we reject the secondary amendment.
The gentleman from the first, Doug McGeehan, to close debate on the secondary amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just asking to give a little flexibility to my district here. Okay, revenues have declined greatly in the last 10 years up in Hancock County. We've had a decline in the steel mills. Homer China up in Hancock County. You guys are probably familiar with Fiesta Ware. They're really declining in sales. And this is just something that would allow, be permissive for one of our larger employers in our district to possibly expand and maybe generate a little bit more revenue for not only our area but the state and increase their business marketing. So understand that the gentleman from Kanawha opposed this secondary amendment, saying everybody should be treated equally. So I hope he opposes the underlying primary amendment from the gentleman from Morgan County if he wants to be consistent. But I would really just ask your support for this. I don't think it's too big of an ask. So with that, I request the yeas and the nays.
The yeas and nays have been demanded on the question of the secondary amendment. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. The question is the adoption of the secondary amendment. Those in favor of the secondary amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result of this question. There are 28 ayes, 68 nays, less than a majority having voted in the affirmative. The chair declares the secondary amendment lost. The question is now on the primary amendment as explained by the gentleman from the 58th. Are the members who wish to speak to the adoption of the primary amendment? The gentleman from the 64th, Douglas Householder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to rise to reject the gentleman's amendment from the 58th. Based upon the information we received, Wheeling Island wanted this just because of all the new construction in their area. This is an agreed upon bill amongst all the casinos. So for those reasons, I urge rejection.
The gentleman from the 35th, Doug Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really am rising to be consistent here. In the call from my friend from the first, I think this is another instance where we're applying the law in an uneven manner. I don't think it's necessarily fair to single out certain places when we have so few that qualify under this law in the first place. And to a different extent, the 5-year sunset period really gives me pause, because what we're doing is we're telling a business to make an investment with zero insurance that investment might be there in 5 years. We're telling them hire a bunch of people, but you might have to fire them in 5 years. So I think it creates some unease in the community, and this is a community that's actually growing in West Virginia. So to be consistent, I would urge rejection of the gentleman's amendment.
The lady from the third, Douglas Storch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also rise to urge rejection of the gentleman's amendment. I understand where he's coming from. However, to follow on what the gentleman from the 35th said, it is a substantial amount of investment that we're asking the tracks to make in our community, and to have them hire people that are only going to be guaranteed employment for 5 years does not seem fair. As the gentleman from the 58th said, the flooding is a serious issue on Wheeling Island, and they're not looking to extend any further licensing. They're just trying to move some of those licenses to get out of the flooding, and also to deal with the upcoming I-70 bridge construction, where 26 bridges along I-70 will be affected. There is also, so interestingly, I first learned of the I-70 bridge construction in 2010. It was expected to be an 8-year project. It hasn't started yet. So I would fear restricting them to 5 years and us finding us be at a point where construction is still ongoing with those 5 years. Wheeling Island also owns the Mardi Gras Casino, so to have them be restricted to just be able to operate a secondary location in Ohio County would be problematic, I believe, as the gentleman from the first had indicated they may have interest, as well as the gentleman from the Eastern Panhandles Casino may as well. And I have another point, and I can't think of what it is. I think that's enough. I might raise my light again, maybe, if it drones on, but thank you very much.
The gentleman at third, Douglas Fluharty.
Thank you. Will the sponsor of the amendment yield, please?
Sponsor does yield.
I'm just trying to get an idea that the gentleman from Kanawha brought up a good point. So your amendment states that if a second location is built in Ohio County, there's a 5-year window. No matter how successful it is, no matter how much revenue it generates for the state, it has to close its doors at 5 years.
It's meant to be temporary. Yes, that's what my amendment does.
So a successful business would have to close its doors in 5 years.
Well, no, the secondary location of the successful business is meant to be temporary during the construction and highway project.
Okay,
underway.
that brings me to my next line of questioning, because you stated in your opening that this bill essentially doubles the location, right? Did you say that earlier?
That's the underlying bill does, yes.
Okay, so say Wheeling Island Casino wants to have a second location which increases, say, 5,000 machines. Just throwing it out there, all right? What stops them right now from already adding on to their current casino and putting 5,000 machines in?
I don't know.
So they could already, if they want to stay in the same location, double it.
That maybe. I don't know. I think there may be an aggregate cap. I don't know. I'd have to look at the law, the racetrack video gaming law. Sorry, I don't know that much about it.
All right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Speak the amendment.
Chairman, proceed.
Yeah, I joined in opposition, and for many reasons, but one that my colleague from the 3rd pointed out is Jim's Roads to Prosperity hasn't been working out very well, and there are a lot of promises have been made but have not been fulfilled, and this 5-year limitation window really puts us in a tough spot. So I think we, above nothing else, we need that window, and I would oppose the amendment. Thank you very much.
Does the gentleman in the 58th wish to close debate on the primary amendment?
Briefly, Mr. Speaker, I will just share that this amendment helps me vote for the bill. Absent this amendment, I don't think I can support the bill, hence the importance for me to offer the amendment. I'm not real happy about the expansion, the locations, and the lack of local input, but it is an effort, I think, for me to be reasonable, be considerate to Ohio County and their special circumstances, and therefore, Mr. Speaker, I urge support of the amendment. Thank you.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment as explained by the gentleman from the 58th. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. No. The noes have it. The amendment is lost. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced. Next bill on second reading.
House Bill 2934, permitting interactive wagering authorized as West Virginia lottery interactive wagering activities.
Are there amendments?
Committee on Judiciary moves to amend the bill. This is H. Jude AM 2-19.
The gentleman from the 27th, Dr. Schott, to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment is in the form of a strike and insert amendment. It came out of Judiciary and was initially second reference to Finance, but as you may recall yesterday, that reference was dispensed with. So this amendment will become the bill, and all it does that's different from the original bill is increase the excise tax or privilege tax, I believe it's referred to, that's required with respect to this type of operation on interactive gaming from 10 to 15%. That change was made at the request of the Finance Committee. That's the only change. Mr. Speaker, I urge adoption.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. Are the members who wish to speak to the adoption of the amendment? If not, those in favor of the amendment will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2968, adding remote service unit to the definition of customer bank communications terminals.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
House Bill 3134, establishing criminal penalties for negligent homicide and increasing criminal penalties for reckless driving.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced. Are there further bills on second reading? If not, bills on first reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 26, permitting certain employees of educational services cooperatives participate in state's teachers retirement system.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2229, adding violations of law upon which a public servant's retirement plan may be forfeited.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2452, creating the West Virginia Cybersecurity Office.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2550, creating a matching program for the Small Business Innovation and Research Program and the Small Business Technology Transfer Program. program.
Bill be advanced.
House Bill 2598, relating to submitting a certified statement attesting to status as a charitable or public service organization.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2617, relating to the form for making offer of optional uninsured and underinsured coverage by insurers.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2690, relating to guarantee associations.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2694, relating to the state's ability to regulate hemp.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2718, requiring purchasers of round wood to collect and maintain certain information.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2770, Fairness and Cost Sharing Calculation Act.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2802, Uniform Partition of Heirs Property Act.
Bill be advanced.
House Bill 2816, removing the terms hearing impaired, hearing impairment, and deaf mute from the West Virginia Code and substituting terms.
Bill be advanced.
House Bill 2827, removing the residency requirements for hiring deputy assessors.
Bill be advanced.
House Bill 2828, relating to qualified opportunity zones.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2830, establishing next generation 911 services in this state.
Bill be advanced.
House Bill 2926, requiring the Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs to study the housing needs of veterans.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2991, relating to the Ryan Brown Addiction Prevention Recovery Fund.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3024, West Virginia Business Ready Sites Program.
Bill be advanced.
House Bill 3045, exempting certain complimentary hotel rooms from hotel occupancy tax.
Bill be advanced.
House Bill 3132, relating to exempting providers that serve no more than 30 patients with office-based medication-assisted treatment.
Bill be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3133, relating to requiring a parolee or probationer found to have suffered with addiction to participate in a support service.
Bill be advanced.
House Bill 3135, expiring funds to the balance of the Department of Commerce Development Office.
Bill be advanced. Are there further bills on first reading? If not, lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, subject to announcements, the House stand in recess until 5:30 p.m.
Lady from the 49th moves that subject to announcements. The House stand in recess until 5:30 p.m. Are there announcements? Gentleman from the 10th, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Finance will meet again this afternoon at 3 p.m. to take up legislation as posted. Your Committee on Finance will conduct a public hearing on House Bill 2730 tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. in the House chambers. And Friday morning at 9 o'clock, the committee will take up legislation again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 48th, Elgin Hamrick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Education will reconvene today at 4 p.m. in the House Education Committee room. The Republican members will caucus in the chairman's office at 3 p.m. We will also be meeting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. in the House Education Committee room. The agenda will be posted.
The gentleman from the 35th, Capto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Committee on the Judiciary will meet this afternoon at 3:30 to resume our agenda in the committee room, and then at 9 a.m. tomorrow we will reconvene and that new agenda will be posted. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 15th, Douglas Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just wanted to announce that the Associated Builders and Contractors in the Lewis McManus room will be providing barbecue and has food for you. They've been there a little while, so it may be a little bit cold, but in Lewis McManus room, barbecue from the Associated Builders and Contractors.
The gentleman from the 41st, Douglas Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Health and Human Resources will meet today at 2 p.m. in 215E. Republican members will caucus immediately following session.
The gentleman from the 12th, Douglas Westfall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have lunch again in 204E, the West Virginia Hospitality and Travel Association providing lunch, and Bar 101 providing the food. Thank you.
The gentleman, the 63rd, Douglas Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just recognize some friends that all the way down from the Eastern Panhandle, my fellow Rotarian, and also my friend Ken Sayer and his beautiful wife. Thank you guys for coming down from the Eastern Panhandle.
Gentleman, the 67th, Douglas Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Democrats on the Education Committee will caucus at 3:30 in room 230 East.
The gentleman, the 50th, Douglas Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Democrats will caucus very briefly in the Health Committee room 215E. We need y'all in the Health Committee room 215E.
Are there further announcements? If not, the question before the House is the gentleman from the 28th, Doggett Pack.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Government Organization will meet tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. in the Government Organization Committee Room, or the Health Committee Room, whichever you prefer. The agenda is posted. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, Republican members of this House will caucus very briefly immediately upon our adjournment.
Are there further announcements? If not, the question before the House is a motion by the lady from the 49th that the House stand in recess until 5:30. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. The House is in recess until 5:30. Senate will please come to order. The Senate will please come to order. All those not having privileges of the floor will please vacate the chamber. And with those on the floor and our guest in the gallery, please rise as we are led in prayer this morning by Dr. D.W. Cummings. He's a senior pastor at Bethlehem Apostolic Temple in Wheeling, West Virginia. And then please remain standing as we are led in the pledge this morning by the senator from Cabell, Pastor Cummings.
Thank you so much. Dear God, we live in a world that is in a hurry for everything, including decisions. It's also a world that's increasingly quarrelsome and full of conflict. You have called these wonderful legislators to be decision makers. And sometimes when they are faced with the most difficult decisions, I'm sure that they may feel at times like running away and hiding. But with your help, you will guide them to make the right decisions that will benefit our entire state of West Virginia. We know you have called this special group of men and women to stand in your place as fair-minded adjudicators of order. Thank you for the example of your son, who taught us to be deliberate in our search for the right answer. We pause in a moment of quietness to ask your spirit to rest upon us. Give us courage to rise to the challenge and not to be overwhelmed by the tasks which we face. In you, O God, we claim the opportunity to be beacons of light in moments of darkness. Help us always to know, red, yellow, black, and white, we're all precious in your sight. Thank you for hearing our prayer. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. The senator from Cabell County.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Reading of the journal.
West Virginia Legislature Senate Journal, February 20th, 2019. The Senate met at 11:13 a.m. Senator Carmichael,
The
Mr.
senior
President.
senator from the 6th requests unanimous consent that further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Introduction of guests. On behalf of the Senate, it is my pleasure to welcome our honorary pages for the day. Please stand and be recognized as your name is called. As guest of the senator from Logan, we have Eric Cochran. As guest of the senator from Raleigh, Tristan Lester. As guest of the senator from Nicholas, Azri Groves and Rev Workman. As guest of the senator from Harrison, we have Emily Owens. And as guest of the senior senator from the 16th, we have Connor Hawkins, Caitlin Hartzell, Paige Herfel, and Xander Lamp. If they would all please stand and the Senate give them a warm welcome. Thank you. You may be seated. Further introductions, the junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Senate, it is my pleasure and yours to introduce our doc for the day. In the rear of the chamber, we have Dr. Brian McCauley. If you wouldn't mind standing up and let the Senate give you a warm welcome.
The senator from Logan County.
Good morning, Mr. President. Seated in the President's Gallery, we have the parents of our page, Eric Cochran, Missy, and Steve Cochran. On behalf of me and my senior senator from the 7th, we'd like for the Senate to give them a warm welcome. Thank you.
The senior senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the rear of our gallery today, we have a special guest with us, former delegate Larry Faircloth. We met years ago when he was running for state campaign, and he came to my shop in Wayne County, and pleasure to have him today. His lovely wife Laura is with him, and they are here coming through town today. Their son, Christian Rose, is an up-and-coming NASCAR great. So, Senate, if you will, join me and make them welcome.
Further introductions, the senator from Nicholas County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm honored to have a couple of great pages today from Nicholas County joining us. They are accompanied today by Rev's mother, Nicole Workman, and Azria's mother, Cassie Gunter. I believe they are sitting in the President's Gallery. If they would please rise, and if the Senate would please extend a very warm Senate welcome.
The senator from Raleigh County.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the senior senator from the 9th District and myself and our page, Tristan Lester, that's here today, her grandmother, Carol Lester, and her brother, Colton Lester, are in the President's Gallery. If you would stand, please, so that the Senate show them welcome.
Senator from Marion County.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the senators from Bonagalia and myself, I'm happy to introduce students from East Fairmont High School, the seniors from an advanced placement government class. And as I call your names, I'd like you to stand up. Kaomi Fritz, Lyric Rice, Brianna Williamson, Emma Harvey, Kelsey Maple, Dakota Baker, Cassandra Morrison, Reed Carpenter, Chloe Osborne, Peyton Schaefer, Carla Holcomb, Gabby Fortney, Cassandra Russell, Kelsey Heston, Destiny Bourgogne, Bailey Tucker, Leah Snyder, Catherine Miller, Skylar Warshwick, and they are accompanied by their teacher, Josh Dobbs, and also we have in the gallery Gary Jack, who is accompanying them, and he is also with the Fairmont Council of Churches. If the Senate would make them welcome.
Further introductions, the senior senator from the 16th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the senator from Jefferson and myself, we are pleased to have the parents of our pages here today, and I'd like for them to stand as I read their names. We have Kevin Hawkins, we have Christine Hartzell, Catherine Herforth, then also Carrie Lamp, and the grandparents Fred and Iva Whittington. If they would stand and receive a warm Senate welcome.
Are there further introductions? Further introductions. Communications from the House.
The Clerk of the House announced the passage by that body of committee substitute for House Bill 2486, using records of criminal conviction to disqualify a person from receiving a license for a profession or occupation.
Message be received, referred to Committee on the Judiciary.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2975, relating to imposition of sexual acts or persons incarcerated.
Message be received, referred to Committee on the Judiciary. Are there further House messages?
No, sir.
Communications from the Executive?
There are none.
Reports from standing committees?
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration Senate Bill 238, increasing fines for passing stopped school bus, and reports back a committee substitute for same, and Senate Bill 547, limiting landowner liability for recreational use of lands, and reports back a committee substitute for same. With the recommendation that the two committee substitutes do pass, respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Government Organization has had under consideration Senate Bill 400, allowing Board of Dentistry create specialty licenses, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass, respectfully submitted, Gregory L. Boso, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Government Organization has had under consideration Senate Bill 432, enacting recognition of emergency medical services personnel licensure interstate compact, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass. Respectfully submitted, Gregory L. Boso, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Pensions has had under consideration Senate Bill 472, exempting retirement income of certain uniformed services members from state income tax, and engrossed House Bill 2743, eliminating reference to municipal policemen's pension and relief funds and firemen's pension and relief funds in section restricting investment, and reports the same back with the recommendation that they each do pass, but under the original double committee references, first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Michael T. Azinger, Chair.
Report will be received under the bill's original double committee reference, will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Finance has had under consideration committee substitute for Senate Bill 539, relating to accrued benefit of retirees in West Virginia State Police Retirement System Plan B, Senate Bill 544, increasing salaries for members of West Virginia State Police over a 3-year period, and Senate Bill 656, relating to electronic filing of tax returns, and reports the same back with the recommendation that they each do pass. Respectfully submitted, Craig Blair, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Economic Development has had under consideration Senate Bill 602, creating matching program for Small Business Innovation and Research Program and Small Business Technology Transfer Program, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Mark R. Maynard, Chair.
Report will be received under the bill's original double committee reference, be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Agriculture and Rural Development has had under consideration Senate Bill 627, relating generally to Rural Rehabilitation Loan Program, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass. Respectfully submitted, Dave Seipolt, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Agriculture and Rural Development has had under consideration Senate Bill 629, regulating to hemp production, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on the Judiciary. Respectfully submitted, Dave Seipolt, Chair.
Report will be received under the original double committee reference, be referred to the Committee on the Judiciary.
Your Committee on Energy, Industry, and Mining has had under consideration Senate Bill 665, originating in committee to allow for expedited oil and gas well permitting, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass. Respectfully submitted, Randy E. Smith, Chair.
Report will be received under the bill's... Report will be received.
Your Committee on Economic Development has had under consideration Senate Bill 666, originating in committee, creating the West Virginia Motorsports Entertainment Complex Investment Act, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass, but with the further recommendation that it first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Mark R. Maynard, Chair.
Report. Report will be received. Referred to Committee on... Report will be received.
That's all I have, sir.
Reports from select committees.
Sorry, I have one more. Your Committee on Economic Development has had under consideration Senate Bill 667, originating in committee, creating the West Virginia Motorsport Committee, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass, but with the further recommendation that it first be referred to the Committee on Government Organization. Respectfully submitted, Mark R. Maynard, Chair.
Report will be received. The Senator from Nicholas County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the second reference to the government organization.
Report will be received.
Thank
Reports
you.
from select committees.
There are none.
Introduction of bills.
There are none.
Resolutions.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 42 by Senators Maynard, Baldwin, Palumbo, Beach, Stallings, Jeffries, and Plymel, naming the Tom and Cindy May Markham Memorial Bridge.
Under the rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over one day.
Senate Resolution 55 by Senators Clements, Baldwin, Plymel, Stallings, Beach, Jeffries, Palumbo, and Seipolt, recognizing Mike Webb for more than 50 years of dedicated public service.
Senator from Wetzel County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, committee dispense, reference be dispensed with, and the bill and the resolution put upon its adoption.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Clerk will please read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 55, recognizing Mike Webb for more than 50 years of dedicated public service as a teacher, coach, administrator, and contest official.
Question for the Senate is adoption of resolution. Is there discussion? The Senator from Wetzel County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've known Mike Webb for many years now, and he and I spent over 25 years together on the football field on Friday night. But his contribution has been much more than what went on Friday night. He's a graduate of St. Mary's High School in St. Mary's. He's a teacher, coach, administrator at St. Mary's High School. He taught at Brewston Mills, Parkersburg High for over 30 years, and has taught at the collegiate level for 11 years. Mike still resides in St. Mary's, but his work off of the field is what's been important. He's done a great job in trying to develop our football officials throughout the state of West Virginia. It's a difficult job to recruit, it's a difficult job to keep them, and it's a difficult job to train them well. And Mike has done every bit of that. His work with the SSAC cannot be, I just can't express in words what he's done. He makes sure that all the playoff games are properly staffed with officials. He goes around the state looking at the football fields and everything to make sure that they meet all the standards that we expect. It's not just a fall job, it's year-round. And he has been very instrumental in keeping safety in the game of football as we know it today. He has served on the NFHS High School Football Rules Committee. He is has been our voting representative with that association for many years, and he has just recently decided it was time to retire. So we're going to miss him. The state is going to miss him. He's done a tremendous job in keeping the game of football as we know it today safe. Mr. President, I urge adoption of this resolution.
Is there further discussion? Not. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted. The junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate stand in brief recess for the purpose of presenting this resolution.
Junior senator from the 17th moves that the Senate stand in brief recess to present this resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the Senate in recess to present this resolution. Senate will please come to order. Senate will please come to order. Are there further resolutions?
Yes, sir. Senate Resolution 56 by Senators Blair, Takubo, Baldwin, Prezioso, Plimal, Stallings, Unger, Romano, Beach, Hamilton, Jeffries, Rucker, Tarr, Palumbo, Maynard, Swope, Lindsay, Roberts, Trump, Klein, and Seipold, reaffirming the sister state relationship between West Virginia and Taiwan.
The Senator from Morgan County.
Take it up. Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent of the Senate that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, that committee reference be dispensed with, and that the resolution be placed upon its adoption.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Clerk will please read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 56, reaffirming the sister state relationship between the state of West Virginia and Taiwan on the occasion of its 40th anniversary.
Question before the Senate is adoption of the resolution. Is there discussion? The senior senator from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to talk about the Republic of China, better known as Taiwan. And they can't be here today. This was going to be a presentation, and because of the snow out to the east, they had to turn around and go back yesterday. I would encourage all the members to take a few minutes and read this resolution. I wanted the clerk to do it, but it was 3 pages long, and I get it. But take the time enough out to read this resolution and get an understanding of our relationship with our sister state that is, trust me, on the other side of the world. They come and take and ask certain legislators if they'd like to take the trip over. I've put them off for, I know, at least 10 years of not going over to visit them. Well, last year I went. And my biggest regret is that I didn't do it in my 10 years earlier. It's one of the top 10 experiences in my life. It was absolutely phenomenal. If you pay attention, you'll notice there's a lot in the news cycle back and forth between Taiwan and mainland China. It's back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. I learned a good bit from being over there on that, but then I never had the awareness that I do now. It's rare that you can not open a newspaper up and see something going on where that friction is back and forth. But yet when you're there in the country, the relationship between the people is so interconnected between there and the mainland, it's rather phenomenal. You can almost equate it a little bit to like West Virginia and Virginia. We're competitors, but yet we're separate entities. And the thing about Taiwan is they're a democracy, as we are. I'm not going to get into the details on what took place over there, except for I got to visit in Mason County. You've got New Century that's over there in Taiwan, owns that company. The company is from Taiwan that come in and bought that. They actually have investment in the state of West Virginia looking for more. As I was sitting with the CEO of that company, we got to talking about things, and the one thing that confused him more than anything about investment in actually the United States, not just West Virginia, but in the United States, was that it took to be able to transfer property, teams and teams of lawyers and time to be involved in. That was one of his biggest criticisms of trying to deal within the United States and have investment. So I can only imagine what it was like when Foxconn was wanting to locate in Wisconsin. Trying to make sure that I get everything that I want to get out here on these folks. How we were treated individually, and there's other members in here that's been there before, I believe. I'm not quite sure. But I would encourage you, it's part of their law actually in Taiwan that they go out and invest X amount of dollars of reaching out, not just in the United States, but throughout the world, to bring people in and learn about their country and what they do and their lifestyles and all that. Oh my golly, I forgot probably one of the most important things. In Taiwan, 7-Elevens are everywhere. And when I say everywhere, I literally mean everywhere. I think they've got something like 17,000 of them. I might even be lowballing that number on that island. You can pay your taxes there. You can do all the things that we have structured throughout, like the DMV and all these different, in the state of West Virginia. Over there, it's 7-Eleven. You can see a 7-Eleven on that side of the building and on that side of the building in the same distance we have here, a street going down the center of it. It's amazing how they've taken what they do there and to adopted free market principles, making it work for the government entities as well. Now I know I've gone on a little bit long, but if they were here, I'd have probably went longer. And I'd like to say one last thing, and I want to speak to the governor's office when we do this. The state of Maryland actually has a trade office in Taiwan for the state of Maryland. Virginia does not, and West Virginia does not. And on the trip, I had another senator that was from Virginia, and this is something that takes place from the executive. It's not something that we do. But a trade office could be combined together for both Virginia and West Virginia, and it's not a lot of money. Believe it or not, it's almost like hiring a lobbyist, so to speak. The total cost on doing a trade office could be right around $250,000, and you split that with Virginia and West Virginia and do it together. There's nothing wrong with that. And I would encourage the governor's office to reach out to the governor's office in Virginia and do that. I think it would go a long ways, because I see them wanting to put investment in West Virginia. And we all know about the China investment. There's $83 billion, and we haven't seen anything yet. I'm old school. I say dance with the ones that brung you. And those that have actually invested into the state of West Virginia, shown their commitment, wanting to be part of this, I'm more than happy to work with them to a greater degree, and it may only ever come to being $200 or $300 million investment, but at least it's not vapor. It's actually true investments in the state of West Virginia and the people in West Virginia. And I'll close with one last thing, and that is that what a wonderful experience. Again, I can't stress this enough. If you're interested, reach out to me. I will connect you up to being able to make that trip. It's a long flight, but it's worth every penny of it to be able to do that. Mr. President, I can't say it with enough strength. I encourage us to adopt this resolution, and I would also request, since they're not here, I would request the yeas and the nays so that we can share that with them when this is complete.
Are there other members desiring to speak to the resolution? The senator from Marion County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also had the opportunity to take the trip to Taiwan, and Taiwan is located in Southeast Asia, right off the coast of China. It's a smallish little island, and with China right next to it, they're dwarfed sometimes by the culture and things of that sort. They actually recognize the country of China as as their home country, but China doesn't fully recognize the citizens of Taiwan. They are a democracy. I'd like to echo a lot of the things that the Chairman of Finance said, and also, you know, this started back in the Reagan administration, where Ronald Reagan actually in 1982 saw the benefit of having a relationship with the country of Taiwan. And West Virginia, you know, got involved. It's similar. It's a beautiful country. We were treated really well. It is a long trip. It's an extremely long trip. And just the things that we do here in West Virginia mirror some of the things they do in Taiwan. I know the relationship with the economics and the industry, we wished Taiwan was closer to us. We have a long way to go exporting some of our timber and things of that sort. But more importantly, they have a robust exchange of students that come over here to the United States and learn about democracy and the things that we value and take it back to, you know, the country of Taiwan. So it's a great relationship. We're proud that West Virginia is a sister to the country of Taiwan, and I certainly urge the adoption of this amendment, this resolution.
Other members desiring to speak to the resolution? If not, question before the Senate is adoption of resolution. The yeas and nays have been demanded. Is the demand sustained? The demand is sustained. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the resolution adopted. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House. Further resolutions?
No, sir.
Motions? Petitions?
There are none.
Unfinished business?
Senate Concurrent Resolution 35, designating days for displaying Honor and Remember flag at West Virginia Veterans Memorial.
Question for the Senate is adoption of resolution. Is there discussion? Not. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House. Further unfinished business?
No, sir.
Bills on third reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 340, repealing obsolete provisions of code relating to West Virginia Physicians Mutual Insurance Company. Third reading of the bill.
Question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? The senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 340 is, as the short title says, a repealer bill. It repeals an entire article of the code. It is Article 20F. In Chapter 33, that was enacted in 2001 originally, creating the Physicians Mutual Company. That's been a great success story, Mr. President. It's repaid its obligations. It stands alone now as a private entity, and this bill will remove from state code the statutes that were enacted in 2001 that were necessary to allow it to be formed and created. I urge passage of the bill.
Is there further discussion? Not. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? So the clerk will close the machine, ascertain the results. On this question being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than the majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 344, relating to operation of state-owned farms. Third reading of the bill.
Question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? The senator from Preston County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 344, I'm told, came from a post-audit report from 2017. There was a 2018 bill which did not complete legislative action. This bill amends Chapter 19, Article 12A, relating to state-owned farms. The bill permits the Commissioner of Agriculture to manage the farms, equipment, and labor, including the use of inmate labor. All food produced from the farms will be sold to the DHHR and to the Division of Corrections. Any surplus food will be sold to other state agencies and then the open market. The money raised from the sale of food will be deposited into a special revenue fund, and if the fund reaches $2 million or more, half of the excess will be transferred to the general revenue. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I urge passage of the bill.
Is there further discussion? Not. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than the majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent. The roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
Junior senator from the 17th moves that the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question there being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than 2/3 of those elected having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 402, authorizing Division of Forestry investigate and enforce timber theft violations. Third reading of the bill.
Question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? The senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 402 addresses crimes and investigation involving theft of timber. It amends 2 existing sections of the state code. One of them is in Chapter 19, which is Article 1A, the Division of Forestry. Chapter 19 is Agriculture. The amended section is 19, Article 1A, Section 3B, and then it amends a section in Chapter 61, Article 3, which is Criminal Code, Crimes Against Property. So, in the first part of it, under current law, the Division of Forestry is the entity that's primarily responsible for investigation of timber theft in our state forests. This would expand that and make some primary for crimes against timber or involving timber throughout the state, inside and outside the state forests. In Section 61.352, there are changes and penalties. Subsection A and subsection B are rewritten here, and it defines misdemeanor and felony offenses, tying the offense to the level or value of timber that is intentionally cut down, injured, removed, destroyed without permission of the owner. So $1,000 or less value, it's a misdemeanor, and there's a prescribed jail sentence and fine. In subsection B, if it's over $1,000 in value, then it's a felony. It contains a prison sentence and a fine or both. Be happy to try to answer questions. Otherwise, Mr. President, I urge the passage of this bill.
Is there further discussion? Not. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? So the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than the majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 510 relating to medical professional liability. Third reading of the bill.
Question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? Senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 510 amends a single section of the state code. It's Chapter 55, Article 7B, Section 6, addressing certificates of need, which is a prerequisite for filing a medical malpractice action. And there are some changes in the bill. The law has been in place almost 20 years now that before you can file a medical malpractice lawsuit, you have to have a certificate of merit, that goes with it. This makes some changes to that, and it requires that the certificate of merit there has to be a 30-day notice for filing of the claim that includes specific information about any of the agents, servants, employees, or officers of the healthcare organization.
that are subject to the suit or will be subject to a suit. The bill will require that a healthcare provider who signs a certificate of merit will have to be qualified as an expert under the West Virginia Rules of Evidence. They'll have to meet the case requirements, the requirements that are set forth in this article, the Medical Professional Liability Act, and now we have to have devoted at the time of the medical injury 60% of his or her professional time annually to active clinical practice in his or her medical field or specialty, or to teaching in his or her medical field or specialty. So that's a requirement that is not part of the certificate of merit process now, but that would be adopted as part of this bill. There's some other changes too. There will be a requirement that the certificate of merit be accompanied by a list of documents, medical records and documents that the expert or the person signing the certificate of merit reviewed, informing his or her opinion that the suit or the claim is meritorious. If a healthcare provider who signs a certificate of merit meets those qualifications, then it establishes a presumption that a list of medical records, a presumption that the healthcare expert is a qualified expert. It updates the requirements for what a certificate of merit must state with particularity, and specifically, as said, the list of medical records reviewed by the expert have to be accompanying with the certificate of merit and included with it. Finally, no challenge of any claim may be raised prior to the receipt of the notice of claim and the executed screening certificate of merit. Mr. President, I'll be happy to try to answer questions. Otherwise, I urge the passage of the bill.
Is there further discussion? Further discussion? Not. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, there being 27 yeas, 6 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than the majority of those present and voting, having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Senate Bill 635, relating generally to coal mining activities. The bill is advanced to third reading with the right to amend.
Are there amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Senator Ehlenfeld moved to amend the bill on page 32.
The senator from Ohio County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would request unanimous consent to amend the bill on third reading and to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
The senator from Ohio County requests unanimous consent to explain the amendments in lieu of having them read, and that all amendments be considered as one. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an amendment in regard to Senate Bill 635, which was originally proposed in part in response to what happened in December of 2018 in Raleigh County, which I know you all are aware of, in which 4 people entered a mine and 3 of them became trapped, and there was quite a substantial rescue operation that occurred. And so part of what we're trying to do here is to address that type of situation in both a civil and criminal context. And so we made some amendments to the original bill that I'll explain and then take any questions that you may have. First and foremost, we are addressing some civil liability and in particular immunity for those who go in and help to rescue those who have become trapped. And so that's the first part. It's a hold harmless clause. It also addresses who has the ability to make the decision who should enter the mine. There's also a temporary exemption for environmental regulations. So if there would be a violation of environmental laws during the rescue operation, there would not be liability for that. We also have tightened up the criminal penalties for this type of activity. Presently, there is a law on the books in 61.312 that makes it a crime to enter an underground coal mine or break and enter or enter without breaking. And there's an intent requirement in the present law that requires you to have the intent to commit a felony or any larceny during that activity. What we've done, with this amendment, we've stricken that part of West Virginia Code Section 61-3-12, and we've created a new code section called mine trespass, which would be 61-3B6. And it differentiates between underground coal mines and surface mines. And I've had conversations with many of you about this, and I think this addresses most of the concerns that I've heard, but if not, I'm sure you'll let me know. So with regard to an underground mine, if someone willfully, without permission, enters an underground mine that has been sealed or has been marked appropriately, then that's a felony, and that would carry a penalty of 1 to 10 years in prison. There's that intent requirement that I mentioned in the current law would not exist. It's simply a willful entry without permission. That would be a felony. If you were to enter a surface coal mine and you would have to have the intent to commit a felony or larceny, and it would be a misdemeanor. And the reason we've differentiated is because I've talked to many of you who talk about people who ride four-wheelers or who are hiking or picking berries or out for whatever reason who might innocently go on to a surface mine property. And so we've added that extra intent requirement that you have to have the intent to steal something or to commit a felony in order to be convicted under that statute. If you do that more than once, the second offense would be a felony and the penalties get more severe. Third offense as well. If you do either enter an underground coal mine without permission or a surface mine with the intent that I mentioned and somebody is hurt, that's an additional crime. If somebody is seriously hurt, the penalties are more severe. If somebody would die during that operation, again, penalties become more severe. So we've tried to address all the situations that might occur when this happens and when there's a rescue operation. We've also addressed the damages that might be owed if someone were to cause damage inside of a coal mine. That's the summary of it. I'm happy to take any questions, and I would urge adoption of this amendment.
Further discussion? The senator from Tucker County.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the worst amendment I've heard since I've been on the floor. I just wanted to see his face when I said that. I'm sorry. No, I want to applaud the gentleman for the hard work he put in it, because that's why it was laid over day and put in amendment on the third reading, because he has a lot of expertise in this field, and I appreciate the work that he did with my energy attorney and the minority attorney for helping out on this. It strengthens the bill, and he cleared up a lot of language that where we was duplicating, and it just made it strengthened the penalties for the people that is going under and risking other people's life. And again, I applaud his effort to make this a better bill, and I urge the passage of the gentleman's amendment. And sorry about that.
Further discussion? Further discussion. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the gentleman yield?
Senator yield. Senator does yield.
I just want to be clear. So if an individual is just riding their four-wheeler and they have no intent to do any misdoings or wrongdoings, that is not a misdemeanor. That's nothing. If they're
under this statute, you have to have the intent to commit a larceny or a felony in order to be convicted.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Not. The question for the Senate is adoption of the amendment as offered by the senator from Ohio County. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
Not. Order the bill to engrossment. Clerk will read the bill a third time.
Engrossed Senate Bill 635, relating generally to coal mining activities. Third reading of the bill.
Question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? The senator from Tucker County.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill is broken down into three parts. It has an economic development part, an environmental part, and an underground coal mining part. The Economic Development part makes changes to the Coalfield Community Development Act by requiring certain information be reported. The environmental part requires the DEP to promulgate several rules, and the underground coal mining part deals with the Office of Miners' Health, Safety, and Training Administration's enforcement, requires any miner issued a personal assessment to either appeal or pay the fine within 30 days of receiving the violation, requires that the state mine rescue team be provided as a backup mine rescue team to operations that cannot secure a backup team. Within the articles dealing with the Office of Mines Health, Safety, and Training, substance abuse enforcement, it allows any employee involved in an accident involving physical injuries or damaged equipment to be drug tested by the employer. Requires that any miner that fails a drug test be suspended for at least 6 months. Within the article dealing with underground mines ventilation, it requires the mine operator submit a copy of the MSHA approved ventilation plan to the Director of the Office of Mine Health, Safety, and Training once it's been approved, and that she'll serve as the state's approved plan as well. Change no regulations with the state on that. Everything stays the same. For apprentice miners, the Director of Office Mine Health, Safety, and Training should promulgate rules to establish a course of instruction that apprentice miners work within the sight and sound of experienced miners for 90 days instead of 120 as long as the training is done. Tracking data allows the Director of the Office Mine Health, Safety, and Training to use the employer's tracking data for the purpose of decertifying an examiner who fails to perform his or her duties, and requires that all existing rules under this article be revised to reflect any changes and tactics during the 2019 regular session. Within the articles dealing with the use of diesel power equipment in underground coal mines, eliminates the requirement that operator must measure nitrogen oxide, NO, unless they're measuring ambient air readings close to the equipment. The diesel equipment within the article dealing with certification of underground and surface coal mines. It allows a competent miner to supervise up to 2 red hat miners instead of limiting it to 1. And it creates a new article titled the Mine Trespassing Act. So the gentleman went over the trespassing part of it, and it just strengthens the laws on the Mine Trespassing Act. With that, Mr. President, I urge passage and be glad to try to answer any questions.
Is there further discussion? Further discussion? If not, all those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? So the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question there being 32 yeas, 1 nay, 1 absent and not voting, more than a majority of those present and voting, having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk has a title amendment.
Senator Ehlenfeld moved to amend the title of the bill.
Question before the Senate is adoption of the title amendment. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Declare the title amendment adopted. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
Junior Senator from the 17th moves that the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question there being 32 yeas, 1 nay, 1 absent and not voting, more than 2/3 of those elected having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 2324, authorizing the Acupuncture Board to issue certificates to perform auricular acudetox therapy. Third reading of the bill.
The Senator from Nicholas County.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for...
The question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? The Senator from Nicholas County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Apologize. Jumped the gun there. The committee substitute for House Bill 2324 authorizes the West Virginia Acupuncture Board to issue certificates to perform auricular detox therapy to specified categories of healthcare providers and other professionals. To obtain a certificate, an applicant from one of the designated groups must complete a board-approved auricular detox training program. Certificate holders may not otherwise practice acupuncture or advertise themselves as acupuncturists. Mr. President, I urge passage of the bill.
Is there further discussion? Not, all those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? The clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than the majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House. The Senator from Marshall County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Request unanimous consent to return to the second order of business for purpose of an introduction.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. The Senator may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the North Gallery, we have a group of students and a principal from Our Lady of the Peace School in Wheeling, West Virginia. On behalf of myself, the Senator from Wetzel, the Senator from Brooke, and the Senator from Ohio, I'd like to welcome them. They come every year. It's a very good school. They do a lot of good work. Every year I've been here, they've been down here to teach their kids about the legislative process, and in this year's group of students is also my goddaughter, Ellie, is one of them here today. So I'd like to welcome all of them and say hi to Ellie.
Further introductions? Further bills on third reading?
No, sir.
Bills on second reading?
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 613, requiring DNR include election of organ donation on hunting licenses. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
Not, the bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading. Are there further bills on second reading?
No, sir.
Bills on first reading. The junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that all bills on first reading be considered read a first time and advanced to second reading.
Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Introduction of guests. Remarks by members of the Senate. Miscellaneous business. The junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I first would like to request unanimous consent that the remarks regarding Senate Resolution 15 by the Senator from Wetzel be printed to the appendix of the Journal.
Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pending announcements, I move the Senate stand recessed until 6 p.m.
Are there announcements? Are there announcements? The senior senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Natural Resources Committee will be meeting tomorrow, a half hour after floor session.
Senator from Tucker County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Energy will meet today at 1 o'clock in 208 West, and the agenda has been posted.
The senator from Nicholas County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Government Organization will be meeting this afternoon, 2 p.m., room 208 West.
The senator from Marshall County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Health will be meeting today at 1 p.m. and 4:51 m. The agenda, which includes 4 bills plus 1 originating bill, has been posted.
Further announcements. The senior senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to clarify the meeting will be in room 208 West, Natural Resources, a half hour after floor session. Thank you.
Are there further announcements? Further announcements? If not, the senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. 2 meetings to announce. Your Committee on the Judiciary will meet today at 3 o'clock p.m. and tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m., both meetings in room 208 West Wing.
The senator from Jefferson County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Education Committee will meet today at 2 o'clock in room 451 m. The agenda has been posted.
The junior senator from the 8th have an announcement.
Mr. President, the West Virginia AFL-CIO will have a labor caucus today, Thursday, February the 21st, immediately following the morning session in room 330 West. Lunch will be provided.
Are there further announcements? Senior senator from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Finance will meet today at 3 p.m., 4:51 m. Agenda's been posted. I'm going to actually announce another meeting for tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, same room, but I don't have an agenda yet, and it may cancel. You'll know more. The members will know more today on what's going on. Thank you.
Are there further announcements? Not. The question before the Senate is, shall the Senate stand in recess until 6 p.m. this evening? All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the Senate in recess until 6 p.m. this evening.